Chapter 1064. His entire body, soul, and even his godhead were all destroyed. This quasi-saint was as dead as a doornail. After this quasi-saint was killed, a group of 10 people stepped out from the void. It was Wen Ling, Yang Qin, and the others. 2 of them were rank 10 quasi-saint, while the other 7 were all rank 7 quasi-saint and above. With such a lineup, killing a rank 7 quasi-saint was as easy as slaughtering a chicken or a dog. Kill. After Wen Ling and the others appeared, they roared and unleashed their strongest attacks, attacking the demi-sages of the demon race around them. At this point, the demon quasi-saint experts had yet to react. Boom! Boom! Wen Ling and Yang Qin were both ranked 10 quasi-saint experts and were extremely powerful. Their first attack was their strongest attack. However, there were no rank 10 quasi-saint experts among the demon quasi-saint experts. Therefore, the moment they attacked, the 2 demi-saints of the demon race were killed. At the same time, Shenzhen's other quasi-saint experts were also facing off against the demon race experts. One by one, the demon quasi-saint experts fell. The tactic of Wen Ling and the others was very simple. They would first kill the demi-saints of the demon race who were weaker than them at lightning speed. Therefore, the moment they attacked, they faced off against the quasi-saint experts who were stronger than them. In fact, these demon quasi-saint experts were not very strong. The strongest was only rank 8, and there was only one of them. Most of them were rank 3 or rank 4 quasi-saint experts. On Shenzhen's side, the weakest quasi-saint was a rank 7 quasi-saint. Moreover, Wen Ling and the others launched a surprise attack. Therefore, it only took an instant for a dozen demi-saints of the demon race to be completely annihilated. It wasn't that they were too weak, but Shenzhen's quasi-saint was too strong. The divine world was not a heaven domain. In the heaven domain, there were hundreds of thousands of quasi-saints from both the human race and the monster race. But that was accumulated over countless years. In the divine world, heavenly venerables were considered super powerhouses, and a first-order quasi-saint was a peak powerhouse among super powerhouses. A Tier 3 quasi-saint was already extremely rare. On Fan Guo's side, the quasi-saint they had invited were all powerful individuals. Therefore, the weakest among them was a Tier 5 quasi-saint. On the other hand, the formation of a dozen quasi-saint from the demon race was already very powerful. It was just that Murong Yu's side was stronger. Kill them. He watched as his companions fell one after another without even having the time to resist. The remaining demi-saints of the demon race finally came to their senses. However, they were no match for Wen Ling and the others in the first place. What more after the death of 10 strong cultivators? Bang! 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 Wen Ling and the others attacked again, especially the 2 Tier 10 quasi-saints, Wen Ling and Yang Qin. Killing Tier 3 and Tier 4 quasi-saints did not take any effort at all. As for the other quasi-saints, although it was difficult for them to kill these quasi-saints in a short period of time, but they were able to kill a monster quasi-saints in a group of a few at a time. As a result, the demi-saints of 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 the demi. Saints of the demi-saints 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 of the demi-saints, all the dozen or so quasi-saints were all killed. Not even a complete godhead was left behind. However, even though they were killed, Fan Guo and the others who were inside the formation did not have it easy at all. This was because the ones controlling the formation were not these monster quasi-saints, but the countless monster race experts within the monster race's territory. Pooh! Just as Wen Ling and the others killed the monster quasi-saints, Fan Guo, who was in the town, was finally injured and spat out blood. Murong Yu was shocked. In the Hichu, Luoshu world, he could see that the Great Void Annihilation Divine Formation's power was millions of times stronger than before. Even heavenly venerables could not get close to it. Even if they were 10 million miles away from the formation, they would be killed by the remaining power of the formation. Inside the formation, even Tier 3 and Tier 4 quasi-saints could not withstand it and were easily killed. Although Fan Gua and the others could still hold on, they were already severely injured. It was only a matter of time before they were killed. Therefore, Morongyu did not come out of the Hichu Luoshu world. He just watched from inside. Destroy the divine formation. Morongyu roared from inside the Hichu Luoshu world. When Ling and the others were in a hurry, they did not say anything and directly attacked the Great Void Annihilation divine formation with their strongest attacks. At the same time, in the monster race's territory, in the Celestial Palace, in a forbidden area deep in the Celestial Palace, a group of 50 people sat in a circle on the ground. In front of them, or beside them, there were divine alliances flashing by. The power of these 50 people seeped out of their bodies and poured into the void in front of them. Waves of terrifying killing intent emanated from the void in front of them. If there were any outsiders here, they would definitely be shocked to see this. In front of these 50 people, there were countless shadows. If Morongyu was here, he would definitely recognize these shadows. They were Fan Gua and the others. In front of these 50 people was the true formation of the Great Void Divine Formation. In fact, the so-called formation could not be seen at all. However, its power was extremely terrifying. Even a projection of a formation that was billions of miles away could trap a top-notch expert like Fan Gua and almost kill him, let alone a real formation. Therefore, the 50 quasi-saint from the monster race were all solemnly pouring their power into the Great Void Annihilation Divine Formation to stimulate the power of the Divine Formation. However, during this process, they were very careful to avoid coming into contact with the Divine Formation. Otherwise, they would be killed. They would not even have the chance to escape. Boom! All of a sudden, the void in front of the 50 people exploded violently. Rays of divine light burst out unceasingly. The bombardment destroyed the void unceasingly. Even the turbulence in the space was struck out by the bombardment. The faces of the many quasi-saint from the monster race changed drastically. At the same time, their figures flashed and they retreated explosively. They left the divine formation far, far away. However, during this process, the power in their bodies was not interrupted at all. Someone is attacking the projection of the formation outside. Increase your power and kill them in one blow. One of the quasi-saint opened his eyes and shouted. Suddenly, the 50 quasi-saint from the monster race released an even more powerful aura. Like raging waves, the power poured into the Great Void Annihilation Divine Formation. Boom! At the same time, the Great Void Annihilation Divine Formation in the stone region of the human race's eldritch continent exploded with a ball of bright divine light. A huge force exploded at the same time. When Ling and the others who did not notice, it were sent flying by this terrifying force. Poof! 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 Fan Gua and the others who were in the divine formation spat out blood from the impact. Some of the quasi-saints' limbs even exploded from the impact. They were severely injured. Because they were severely injured, the disciples of the Fan and Ouyang families who were protected by them in the formation finally suffered casualties. In an instant, hundreds of people were turned into a ball of powder. They could not be more dead. Countless people in the formation were shocked and could not help but cry out. At this moment, the Fan family was also spitting out blood. Use your strongest attack to destroy the divine formation. Morongyu, who was in Hichu Luoshu, shouted anxiously in his heart. He knew that Fan Gua and the others could not hold on for much longer. Moreover, the experts in the monster race's territory must have increased their power. Everyone, use your strongest attack. Join forces with the people outside and attack for both sides. Destroy this damned formation. Fan Gua roared as his aura soared. The violent power was like a raging wave that crashed into the great void annihilation divine formation. At the same time, the other quasi-saints, including the people who were escorting the bride, roared and attacked. Boom, boom, boom. More than 30 sages-to-be attacked from both inside and outside. The power of more than 30 sages-to-be bombarded out crazily. The bombardment destroyed the surrounding void unceasingly. The turbulence in the space constantly rushed out. Celestial Palace. The great void annihilation divine formation became even more violent. Rays of divine light soared into the sky and forced many quasi-saint experts to retreat. Humph! The human race's reinforcements have arrived so quickly? One of the monster race quasi-saint sneered. No matter how many of them come, they will all die. Another quasi-saint sneered as well. The power that was injected into the great void annihilation divine formation became even more violent. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, more than 10 figures shot out from the right and landed beside the 50 quasi-saints. More than 10 quasi-saints. There were close to 70 quasi-saints. After these 10 quasi-saints arrived, they did not say anything and directly injected a huge amount of power into the divine formation. Boom! An aura that was many times more powerful than before soared into the sky. Within the formation, thousands of disciples from the Fan family and the Ouyang family were instantly killed. There was not even a trace of them left. Even Fangua and the other quasi-saints spat out blood from the impact. The more serious the injuries, the weaker their strength. However, the power of the divine formation became more and more violent. Wen Ling and the others outside the divine formation were not killed. However, the powerful aura from the divine formation forced them to retreat. What a terrifying divine formation. I'm afraid there are no less than 50 or 60 people controlling it. Wen Ling and the others said with a gloomy expression, "If this continues, we will not be able to break this damned divine formation." One of the Shenzhen's quasi-saints said angrily, "There are quasi-saints attacking the divine formation outside. I think our 10 quasi-saints have already fallen. This time, we will kill the human race and turn the world upside down. Leave no survivors." One of the monster race's quasi-saints said with a murderous look. The people controlling the divine formation did not say anything. However, each of them had already raised their strength to the limit. The monster race is too presumptuous. How dare they set up a divine formation to kill the enemy within the human race's territory? Just as Murong Yu and the others were furious and anxious, an angry roar came from the sky. Then a blood-red hand suddenly stretched out from the sky and slapped directly at the great void annihilation divine formation. Level 10 quasi-saints. The Bloody Butchers. When he saw the blood-red hand, Murong Yu and the Hichu Luoshu world could not help but be overjoyed. Since the Bloody Butcher had rushed over, wouldn't the experts from Primeval College also arrive? Chapter 1065. The Bloody Butcher, one of the quasi-saint powerhouses of Primeval College, had reached the 10th Order quasi-saint realm. Before he even arrived, his large hand had already traversed the void and bombarded the projection of the great void annihilation divine formation. The terrifying impact caused the formation to tremble. However, no matter how powerful the Bloody Butcher was, he could not break the divine formation. At this point, 5 10th Order quasi-saint powerhouses had already made their move. Seeing the Bloody Butcher appear, everyone present could not help but become excited. The quasi-saint powerhouses made their move again. 5 10th Order quasi-saint powerhouses made their move at the same time. 1 10th Order quasi-saint was already terrifying enough, let alone 5 of them. The power of 5 people bombarded the divine formation at the same time. Rumble! The entire divine formation shook violently, almost shattering. At the same time, in Celestial Palace, the great void annihilation divine formation suddenly emitted a blinding light, and a terrifying impact surged out. Bang! 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 Several goblin quasi-saint powerhouses were caught off guard and were sent flying. As for the others, although they weren't sent flying, they were still bombarded to the point where their chi and blood were churning. As a result, the power they poured into the divine formation was naturally blocked. The momentary stagnation caused the power of the divine formation to plummet countless times. Now's the time. In the human territory, Fangua and the other powerhouses suddenly felt the divine formation's power drop by several times. Immediately, all the quasi-saint powerhouses roar at the same time and unleash their most powerful attacks, bombarding the projection of the divine formation. Rumble, 5/10th order quasi-saint powerhouses, and more than 30 quasi-saint powerhouses of other realms. All the power poured into the divine formation, and in an instant, the entire divine formation was torn apart. Let's get out of here quickly. Fangor roared and reached out his large hand, grabbing the people from the Fan and Ouyang families and shooting out of the divine formation. Quick, quick, don't let them escape. Inside the celestial palace, outside the great void annihilation array, when the quasi-saint of the demon race saw that Fangua and the others had broken out of the array, they roared in anger. The quasi-saint of the demon race, who had been knocked back, quickly rushed out and continuously poured power into the god array. Quasi-saint's speed was extremely fast. In less than an instant, Fangua and the others all rushed out. Just as they charged out, the power of the divine array exploded once more. Shit. We let them escape. In the celestial palace, seeing that the divine matrix was empty, Quasi-saint of the monster clan looked gloomy. Go for wool and come home shorn. They had set up an ambush to kill Fangua and the others, but in the end, they had lost more than a dozen quasi-saint level experts. On Fangua's side, tens of thousands of people had also been killed by the divine formation. However, none of the experts at quasi-saint's level had fallen. At most, they had been gravely injured. Even Fangua was gravely injured by those people. They won't recover from their injuries for at least a few million years. Although we couldn't kill them, we would have wiped out the human race in a few million years. It's no different from killing them. In the celestial palace, a quasi-saint of the demon race spoke calmly. But they still have the possibility of recovering their strength quickly. In the end, it's better to just kill them, another quasi-saint said with an ugly expression. All in all, we've achieved our goal this time. I think it's time for the war between the two races to begin. The human race will be completely annihilated after this war. The God Realm, the 3,000 immortal realms, and the 108,000 cultivation realms will all belong to us monsters. As he spoke, the quasi-saint of the demon race had stopped pouring power into the great void annihilation array. Naturally, the projection of the array that had almost killed Fangua and the others had disappeared as well. Monsters! Fangua and the others looked at the projection of the array as if they had just survived a disaster. Their faces were gloomy and murderous. They couldn't wait to rush over to the demon race and wipe them out. The Bloody Butcher, I didn't expect Primeval College to make a move, Fangua said with some emotion and surprise as he looked at the Bloody Butcher. We're all human experts. It's inevitable that we'll make a move. As he spoke, the Bloody Butcher glanced at Morong Yukuli. Then he turned around and soared into the sky, quickly disappearing from everyone's sight. Fangua and the others looked at Morongyu. They understood the meaning of the Bloody Butcher's glance. Primeval College had made a move this time because of Morongyu. Morongyu felt a little helpless. He didn't think that Primeval College had made a move because of him. The reason Primeval College had made a move was probably because they were all human experts. Everyone, it's all thanks to all of you this time. The Fan family will do our best to compensate you for your losses today. Now, please go to the floating mountain to recuperate. Even if the demon race attacks there, it will be absolutely safe. Fangua bowed to the quasi-saint and said in a deep voice, We're here to attend the wedding. Wouldn't it be a pity if we left halfway? A quasi-saint said with a smile. Immediately, everyone set off again and flew towards the floating mountain. This time, we've been too careless. I didn't expect the demon race to set up the Great Void Annihilation Divine Array. We almost failed miserably, Fangua said with a sigh. Their original plan was to lure out the demon race experts and then kill them. However, they didn't expect the demon race to be so generous. Murong smiled and said, "Although we've lost tens of thousands of people, the demon race has lost more than 10 quasi-saint experts. They must be feeling the pain now, right? Including the previous ones, more than 30 quasi-saint experts from the demon race have fallen. Heavy losses. With such heavy losses, the demon race will definitely go crazy when they seek revenge. The war between the two races could break out at any time. The more quasi-saint experts we kill, the greater our chances of victory. Moreover, they provoked us first," Fang was said calmly. Murong was suddenly confused. "Since the war between the two races is inevitable, why don't we just kill them directly? Initiating the war is much better than being passive, right? Both the demon race and the human race are trying their best to avoid a war. This is because once the war starts, blood will flow like rivers. However, because of the interference from above, the war between the two races can't be avoided. Therefore, before the war, both races are buffering to strengthen their forces." Murong lightly nodded his head as he finally understood. The war between the two races could have been avoided. However, because of the saints' interference, it couldn't be avoided. In other words, the realm of the gods was still controlled by the saints of the upper realm. They were all controlled by the saints. This made Murong a little unhappy. In fact, no one would be happy. However, they could only do things according to the saints' wishes. Otherwise, the saints could easily kill gods, even if they were false saints. No matter what, there is only one race in the heavenly realm and the lower realm. Humans and demons can't coexist. This is a war between the saints of the upper realm, but the lower realm people are the ones suffering. Fang's eyes flashed with murderous intent. It was as if he couldn't wait to kill his way into the heavenly realm and kill those saints. However, he only thought about it and didn't dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, he would be killed by the saints. Although there are no quasi-saint experts this time, there are still many of them. I'm afraid that these 20 quasi-saint experts won't be able to fight for a few million years. Once the demon race starts the war, we will lose more than 20 quasi-saint experts. Fang sighed and looked worried. Not necessarily. Annie, have you forgotten my other identity? Miracle Doctor Sacred Hands. These injuries are nothing in my eyes. Fang was overjoyed. He was still worried about these injured people. If Murong was able to quickly heal them, they would be able to give the Yao clan another surprise. No problem. After the wedding, I will immediately treat them, Murong said confidently. After a period of flying and teleportation, Murong and the rest finally returned to Floating Mountain. On the way, no one dared to make a move. The demon race quasi-saint only prepared the great void extermination god formation and thought that it would be enough to kill Fan and the rest. Hence, he didn't have any backup plans. As for the human race quasi-saint experts who attacked before, because when Ling and the other 10 quasi-saint experts didn't have any injuries, they didn't dare to make a move. Otherwise, they would definitely die. After welcoming the bride to Floating Mountain, it was time to perform the ceremony and send her to the bridal chamber. Fan Tong's wedding could be considered completed. However, Floating Mountain was still lively. This was because although Fan Tong's wedding was completed, however, the Fan family held a banquet and celebrated for 100 years. During this process, the news of the Fan family being ambushed on the way to the bridal chamber spread. The demon race lost more than 10 quasi-saint experts, which made many people laugh. However, this scene made many forces nervous. This was because they knew that the war between the two races would soon arrive. On this day, Murong walked out of the room of the last quasi-saint and let out a long sigh of relief. After 100 years, the injuries of more than 20 quasi-saint experts had all been healed. However, in order to give the demon race a surprise, these people didn't show up and pretended to be in a state of recovery. It's time to take a trip to Abyssal College. Murong's eyes flashed with a cold light. He was ready to go to Abyssal College to collect his debts. However, at this time, Xiang Sungwu sent a message. Mu Rongyu immediately went to Primeval College and appeared in Xiang Sung-woo's courtyard. "Old Xiang, what's the matter? Don't you know that I'm very busy?" After Mu Rongyu appeared, he immediately sat down in an imposing manner and casually spoke. "It's about your life." Xiang Sung-woo glanced at Mu Rongyu and said casually, "I'm not sick or ill, and I still have a long life ahead of me. Aren't you cursing me to death?" Mu Rongyu said angrily. "The demon race is going to make a move on you," Xiang Sung-woo said calmly. On the other hand, Mu Rongyu jumped up. Chapter 1066. The devil race wants to make a move against me? What's going on? Mu Rongyu jumped up and looked at Xiang Sung-woo in confusion. "Operation Decapitation," Xiang Sung-woo said calmly. Mu Rongyu was speechless. If they want to decapitate someone, they should at least target someone like the dean of Primeval College, or someone like the patriarch of the Fan family, or someone like that. Although I, Shenzhen, have risen to power, I'm still not considered a powerful force in the realm of the gods. Xiang Sung-woo looked at Mu Rongyu, his eyes full of surprise. This was the first time he saw Mu Rongyu being so modest. He was being overly modest. Although Shenzhen didn't have many experts, there were still 10 quasi-saint level experts. The weakest among them was a quasi-saint of the 7th step, and there were even 2 10th step quasi-saint. If such a lineup wasn't considered a powerful force, then what kind of force could be considered a powerful force? Many people think that it's because of you that the 10 quasi-saint are so loyal to Shenzhen. As long as you're killed, the 10 quasi-saint will naturally leave Shenzhen. Naturally, Shenzhen won't count for much. Xiang Sung-woo explained. Mu Rongyu was depressed. "I've become one of the targets of the devil race's Operation Decapitation? Is it an honor or a misfortune?" "Both. Operation Decapitation. Not only could it kill many experts of the human race, it could also strike a blow to the morale of the human race. Think about it. The war hadn't even started, but the patriarchs of the other major forces were all killed. Once the war started, who would still have morale? Especially those forces that have been decapitated, they couldn't possibly display their strength on the battlefield. Shenzhen and Quasi-Saint may be powerful, but there are definitely many people who want to deal with you. So, for the time being, you'd better not go out. Just stay in Shenzhen or Primeval College." Xiang Sung-woo warned Mu Rongyu seriously. Mu Rongyu was just at the Heavenly Emperor realm. If there was the demon race's quasi-saint executing the beheading operation, he could not escape at all. They would be killed instantly. Mu Rongyu's heart was also filled with depression. Besides, it was impossible for him to hide in Primeval College or Shenzhen all day, because in that case, when would he be able to break through? Since the demon clan is preparing for the beheading operation, do we humans have a similar plan? Mu Rongyu asked in a deep voice. Within the demon clan, Celestial Palace is the most powerful force. It's not an exaggeration to say that they rule all the demon clan. Once Celestial Palace gives an order, countless demon clan experts can only obey. However, the human race is divided into countless forces. Although Primeval College is the most powerful force in the Eldritch continent, they don't have the authority to order the experts of other forces. Therefore, if we want to launch the beheading operation, we have to join forces with the 4 great colleges. However, this is another problem, Xiang Sung-woo said helplessly. Mu Rongyu nodded. It was extremely difficult to organize a team to carry out the beheading operation. Can we only passively endure it? Mu Rongyu was a little unhappy. The highest level of defense was offense. They could just kill their way over. However, Mu Rongyu also knew that the war between the 2 races was coming. After the beheading operation, it should be a full-scale war. However, this had nothing to do with him, because his influence was not great and his strength was not strong. Even if he said something, no one would pay attention to him. Now, what he needed to do was to improve his and Shenzhen's strength as much as possible. Otherwise, once the human race lost the war, there would be no more humans in this world. Shenzhen was no exception. After leaving Xiang Sung-woo's place, Mu Rongyu directly returned to the Holy City. At this time, Shenzhen was more lively than before. More people passed the test and joined Shenzhen. Standing in the sky above the holy city and looking at the disciples of Shenzhen, Murong pondered, once the war between the two races breaks out, how many of these people will survive? The human race must not be defeated. Otherwise, there will be no more humans in the holy world. I'm afraid I can't keep them alive, let alone ascending to the holy world. This is definitely a huge test on my path of cultivation. If I can pass this test, I can ascend to become a saint. If I can't pass it, everything will be destroyed. Shenzhen is a sect I founded in the cultivation world. It's the culmination of all my efforts. It can't be destroyed. It will live and die with me. Murong made up his mind. Then, he took a step forward and appeared in the holy palace. After releasing all the quasi-saint from Hichu Luoshu, Murong once again brought Wen Ling and Yang Qin, the two 10th level quasi-saint. His figure flickered, and when he reappeared, he was already at Abyssal College. What is Murong doing here? When Murong and the other two appeared, some of the big shots of Abyssal College had already noticed them. While they were puzzled, a few people had already appeared in front of Murong. In reality, although Murong was famous in the realm of gods, his strength was not enough for the big shots of Abyssal College to appear. The only reason they appeared was because of the two 10th level quasi-saint, Wen Ling and Yang Qin. Murong, Sect Master Shenzhen, long time no see. What business do you have with Abyssal College? A quasi-saint level big shot looked at Murong and said in an unpleasant tone. It was obvious that because of Murong, Abyssal College had suffered great losses. It would be strange if they were friendly to Murong. Of course, Murong did not mind. After all, he did not come here to make friends. So, he said, I'm looking for someone. Could it be that Sect Master Shenzhen has friends in Abyssal College? I heard that Holy Lord Murong has been listed as one of the targets in the beheading operation. If I were you, I would stay in Primeval College and not leave. Another big shot from Abyssal College looked at Murong and sneered. Murong indifferently glanced at the other party. Are the Heaven Wasteland Academy all cowards? How could someone like you become a big shot in Abyssal College? It would be strange if Abyssal College did not decline. You, the quasi-saint roared and took a step forward, wanting to force Murong. At this moment, Wen Ling snorted. The big shot from Heaven Wasteland Academy trembled slightly, a look of horror flashing across his eyes. Although they were both quasi-saint, Wen Ling was much stronger than him. Wen Ling could even kill him without making a move. Cut the crap. Tell your Hua Yongyi to come out and see me. Murong's face turned cold and said coldly, Holy Lord Murong, you're so mighty. This is not Shenzhen, but Abyssal College. If you want to throw your weight around, please go back to Chaos Shenzhen. The first quasi-saint to speak said coldly, Boom, boom. Before he could finish his sentence, Wen Ling and Yang Qin's bodies suddenly exploded with a terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and earth. In less than an instant, the terrifying aura of the two rank 10 quasi-saints soared into the sky and covered the entire Abyssal College. The terrifying aura was like the end of the world, suppressing all life in Primeval College. At this moment, countless Abyssal College students felt an extremely strong aura of death. Some people were even forced to crawl on the ground by the two terrifying auras. Who dares to be so presumptuous in Abyssal College? Just as when Ling's and Yang Qin's auras erupted, waves of powerful auras also erupted from the Heaven Wasteland Academy. Among them, there were a few auras that were similar to Wen Ling and Yang Qin's. Rank 10 Quasi-Saint. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several figures appeared in front of Murong and the other two, all of them looking at Murong and the other two with murderous intent. At this moment, Wen Ling and Yang Qin had already retracted their auras. Abyssal College doesn't seem to welcome me. I had no choice but to do this. Please forgive me. Murong smiled at the big shots from Abyssal College. Murong, it's you? What are you doing here? Abyssal College's rank 10 Quasi-Saint, Shura, looked at Murong coldly. His expression was indifferent, but his eyes were filled with killing intent. Find someone and hand Hua Yongyi over. Otherwise, my two friends' patience is limited. If something unfriendly happens, I'm afraid Abyssal College will be implicated. Murong still had a smile on his face, not fearing Shura at all. A threat. A blatant threat. Everyone present was a big shot from Abyssal College, yet nobody like Murong dared to threaten them, and in such a brazen manner. In an instant, all the powerhouses, including Shura, were enraged. Their hearts were filled with killing intent, and they could not help but want to kill Murong. However, Murong was not afraid. These two friends of mine are rank 10 quasi-saint. If you're unfriendly, even if I fall here, the whole Abyssal College will be buried with me. Moreover, TSK, I'm a student of Primeval College. Hearing this, the big shots from Abyssal College were shocked. The killing intent instantly dissipated. They all knew that Murong was telling the truth. However, if they were to obediently follow Murong orders after being threatened like this, Abyssal College would lose all face. My enmity with Hua Yongyi has nothing to do with Abyssal College. Murong said indifferently, giving the big shots from Abyssal College a way out. Shura snorted and walked down the stairs. Then, he reached out his hand and directly grabbed Hua Yongyi, who was in seclusion in his courtyard. Which bastard? Hua Yongyi was in seclusion when he suddenly realized that he was taken out of his room. He was so angry that he was about to curse out loud. However, they soon discovered Marshal God Azura and the others. Immediately, he swallowed the words he was about to say. What's going on? A trace of doubt flashed through Hua Yongyi's mind before he saw Murong. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat for no reason. Chapter 1067. Hua Yongyi was also one of the big shots of Abyssal College. He had never been dragged out of his residence without any background. Moreover, there was also someone like Shura present. Hua Yongyi immediately had a bad feeling. Could it be related to Murong? Apart from Murong trio, everyone else present was a big shot of Abyssal College. They shouldn't treat him like this. However, what grudge did he have with Murong? Hua Yongyi was puzzled. This was because he had long forgotten that he wanted to control Murong. After all, at that time, Murong was just a small fry. Heavenly Lord Realm and Heavenly Lord Realm experts were controlled by him. It was nothing much. However, he didn't know that Murong had always been brooding over this matter. In fact, Murong wasn't a petty person. However, Hua Yongyi's actions were truly disgusting. If he didn't have the Hichu Luoshu, his mind would have been controlled at that time. Then, Hua Yongyi would have known all of his secrets. This was unforgivable. Hua Yongyi, long time no see. Your realm still hasn't improved. How disappointing. When Hua Yongyi looked at Murong laughed. Murong, what do you want? Hua Yongyi frowned and said unhappily, I want to ask you something. Do you still remember how you control my mind? Murong still had a smile on his face. However, deep in his eyes, there was a glimmer of light. At this time, Shura and the others finally understood why Murong risked being beheaded to Abyssal College. He was here to take revenge. If it were them, they would definitely take revenge. After all, it was unforgivable to have one's mind controlled. As expected, it's because of that matter. Hua Yongyi's heart sank. He immediately sneered and said, Murong was forced to do so. But that also proved your innocence. Innocent? Murong sneered. Your main purpose is not to control my mind, but to control me. Moreover, you must have learned all my secrets after controlling my mind. Moreover, you left a backup plan in my soul after controlling my mind. You wanted to control me as a person. Hua Yongyi, you're really thoughtful. Hua Yongyi's face suddenly changed. Murong was clearly slandering him. He didn't see anything back then, and he didn't leave anything behind. However, the person involved, Murong, had said so. Moreover, the people from the 4 great academies had seen him controlling Murong's mind. This already made him unable to defend himself. Hua Yongyi knows many of my secrets. Cultivation techniques, various treasures, and even some treasured lands that only I know about. I don't know how many of you here he has told these things. However, This is absolutely intolerable. Hua Yongyi must die. Hua Yongyi's face changed again. He looked at Mu Rongyu eerily and sneered. You want to kill me? Who do you think you are? Mu Rongyu didn't look at Hua Yongyi. He only looked at Shura and the others. I don't know what you mean. Perhaps you Abyssal College already know my secrets. However, I won't bicker with you. However, Hua Yongyi must die. Otherwise, the great Holy Lord Shengzhen, have my mind controlled. If news of this spreads, how can I establish myself in the realm of the gods? Of course, if you want to protect Hua Yongyi, then I have nothing to say. As soon as Mu Rongyu finished speaking, Wen Ling and Yang Qin stepped forward and looked at Shura and the others indifferently. His meaning was clear. If Abyssal College wanted to protect Hua Yongyi, then they would have to fight it out. The one with the bigger fist would be the truth. Hua Yongyi, do you know some secrets about him that you don't want to tell us? Mu Rongyu wants to silence you. Shura didn't say anything. He only transmitted his question to Hua Yongyi. Hua Yongyi couldn't defend himself. He felt that he had been wronged. Senior, how would I know any secrets? Although I controlled his mind, I didn't see anything. Hua Yongyi hurriedly explained. Mu Rongyu is clearly framing me. Hua Yongyi added in the end. Shura frowned. If Hua Yongyi really didn't see anything, then why would Mu Rongyu do this? Hua Yongyi was just an ordinary big shot in Abyssal College. It seems that Abyssal College wants to protect Hua Yongyi. It seems that you have already shared my secrets. Seeing that Shura didn't speak for a long time, Mu Rongyu said indifferently. Holy Lord, if that's the case, then just kill all of these rats. What bullshit Abyssal College, I'll wipe them out with a slap. Wen Ling said with a murderous aura. Boundless killing intent erupted from his body. Shura's expression changed. To be honest, Shura and the others weren't afraid of Wen Ling and the others. Abyssal College also had several 10th Order Quasi-Saint. However, this was Abyssal College. If they were to fight here, Abyssal College would definitely be destroyed. Moreover, if they offended Mu Rongyu, who was a despicable person, Abyssal College wouldn't be able to exist anymore. However, Hua Yongyi couldn't be handed over to them. Mu Rongyu, don't go too far. Whether Hua Yongyi did it or not, you know very well. Shura said indifferently. Are you trying to deny it? Forget it. I'm really disappointed in Abyssal College. Since that's the case, Wen Ling, Yang Qin, you guys can do it. The faces of the big shots from Abyssal College immediately changed. Their killing intent surged. Wait, Mu Rongyu, how do you want this to end? Very simple. Hua Yongyi must die. That's impossible. Of course, if you don't want Hua Yongyi to die, there's another way. My secrets are quite valuable. If you can compensate me with something of equivalent value, then I'll pretend that this never happened. Hee hee. The big shots from Abyssal College all sneered in their hearts. This was Mu Rongyu's goal, right? He was here to extort resources. A secret location, Shura said in a deep voice. Ha ha. Mu Rongyu laughed. Then he looked at Shura and said, Shura, are you trying to dismiss a beggar? Or is Hua Yongyi's life only worth a secret location? Or are all my secrets worthless? Maybe your secrets are valuable, but I don't know anything about them. Valuable my ass. Hua Yongyi cursed Mu Rongyu in his heart. 100 secret locations. No more excuses, otherwise we'll talk about it. Mu Rongyu's face was cold. Lion's mouth. 100 secret locations? Before this, Abyssal College had already been extorted by Primeval College for more than 100 secret locations. If Mu Rongyu was given another 100 secret locations, Abyssal College would not have many secret locations. At this moment, the big shots from Abyssal College had their facial muscles twitching. 100 secret locations, or Hua Yongyi's death. However, Hua Yongyi doesn't seem to be worth this price. Then you might as well give Hua Yongyi to me. Mu Rongyu said lightly. Shame. Whether it was giving Hua Yongyi to Mu Rongyu or exchanging 100 secret locations, it was a shame for Abyssal College. However, if they don't agree, then the price would be even greater. Mu Rongyu was not Primeval College, and Primeval College may have estimated that Abyssal College would not make a move. But Mu Rongyu was a madman. Almost all the forces that had offended him had been slaughtered by him, leaving no survivors. This madman would definitely dare to make a move on Abyssal College. Once he made a move, Abyssal College would lose more than just Huayongi or 100 secret locations. If Huayongi was given to Murongyu, it would chill the hearts of the teachers and students of Abyssal College. Abyssal College couldn't even protect its own teachers and students, who would join them in the future. What a deep scheme. I'm afraid that he was aiming for 100 secret locations from the beginning. Many of the big shots from Abyssal College sneered in their hearts. They couldn't wait to slap Murongyu to death. Murongyu was indeed aiming for 100 secret locations. He expected that Abyssal College would not hand over Huayongi. Therefore, he has been threatening Abyssal College by killing Huayongi, but his real purpose was 100 secret locations. Good. 100 secret locations. Shura pondered for a long time, then said in a deep voice, Huayongi, you've done a good thing. You should commit suicide. At this time, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded in Huayongi's mind. Suicide? Huayongi's face turned pale, and then he suddenly realized. Once he committed suicide, Murongyu naturally would not have an excuse to blackmail Abyssal College. And Abyssal College did not need to hand over him or 100 secret locations. Many of the big shots from Abyssal College looked at Huayongi coldly. Huayongi's face was ashen and finally sighed and chose to commit suicide. However, just as he was about to make a move, Murongyu gave Wenling a signal with his eyes. Wenling immediately shot and pulled Huayongi over, and at the same time sealed his power so that he could not even commit suicide. In order to prevent accidents before the completion of the handover, let us take care of Huayongi. Murongyu said faintly. That faint smile, in the eyes of many big shots from Abyssal College, was incomparably abhorrent. Well, now Huayongi could not even commit suicide. Abyssal College could only hand over 100 secret locations to Murongyu. Everyone saw that Huayongi was taken into his sacred tool by Murongyu. In this way, unless you kill Murongyu and grab his sacred tool, otherwise, no one can kill Huayongi. What a treacherous little bastard. Many big shots from Abyssal College were about to explode. Chapter 1068. 100 secret planes were a huge asset for Abyssal College. But in any case, they couldn't deny it. It turned out that Abyssal College really had a lot of secret planes. In less than half a month, Murongyu was notified of the matter. Abyssal College, in a hall. Several big shots of Abyssal College, and Murongyu only had 5 or 6 people here. And Shura didn't even have a quasi-saint level big shot. Obviously, Abyssal College was disgusted with Murongyu. Those powerful big shots didn't want to see Murongyu at all. It was probably because they were afraid that after seeing Murongyu, they couldn't help but kill Murongyu. 100 secret planes can now be handed over to you. But before handing them over to you, you must build your own transmission array. One day after the delivery, we will destroy Abyssal College's transmission array. After seeing Murongyu, one of the big shots of Abyssal College said in a cold voice. His face was as black as charcoal, and his tone was very cold. This is the list of the 100 secret planes and a general introduction. One of the big shots of Abyssal College threw a jade slip to Murongyu. Murongyu didn't look at the jade slip and put it into the Hichu Luoshu world. At the same time, he said lightly, "You can remove the transmission array of these 100 secret planes before tomorrow. But now I have to go in and check each one, because I don't trust you." The big shots of Abyssal College were about to explode, but they didn't. They just sneered and thought, "I'd like to see how you can build a transmission array in one day." These secret planes were in different places in the heavenly realm. Every time a secret plane was found, a transmission array would need to be built. Even with the ability of the Heaven Wasteland Academy, it would take a very long time to build 100 transmission formations of the secret plane. They gave Murongyu a day's time because they didn't want to give Murongyu much. If after a day, Murongyu didn't set up the transmission formation for those secret planes, then they naturally wouldn't be able to enter those secret planes. Naturally, those secret areas returned to Abyssal College. And in one day, Yu couldn't even build a teleportation array to the secret plane. If there was no teleportation array, he wouldn't know where to enter these secret areas. This was why Abyssal College was so generous. Whatever. A big shot of Abyssal College sneered and led Yu to a courtyard deep inside Abyssal College where teleportation formations were everywhere. All the teleportation arrays leading to the 100 secret planes were activated. When Ling and Yangqin stood in the courtyard and didn't leave, Yu, on the other hand, stepped into the first hidden area. Whoosh! Yu appeared in the secret plane. However, he didn't have much time to look around. His figure rose into the air and flew forward. In the process, he threw down one teleportation point after another. After throwing down dozens of teleportation points in a row, Yu was sent out from the teleportation array again. The whole process took less than a dozen breaths. Time was tight. After appearing in the courtyard, Yu entered the second secret plane. Following the pattern of the gourd and a ladle, after scattering a few dozen teleportation points, he teleported back. This cycle repeated in an hour. Yu had already gone through the 100 secret planes. You can remove the teleportation arrays of these 100 secret planes. After Yu was sent out from the last secret plane, he said to the big shots of Abyssal College. Those big shots sneered in their hearts. They stretched out their big hands and directly destroyed these teleportation arrays. So, shouldn't you release Hua Yomi? I should have done so long ago. Yu smiled slightly and released Hua Yomi from the Hichu Luoshu world. However, no one knew whether it was intentional or not. Hua Yomi, who was originally sealed, fell to the ground in a dog shit posture when he appeared. This made Hua Yomi and the people of Abyssal College very angry. Yu replied with an embarrassed smile. Said, "Sorry, I can't control this sacred tool freely. It was an accident, a skillful accident." What the F***CK? Hua Yomi couldn't wait to slap Yu to death, and the people of Abyssal College also looked at Yu with murderous intent. However, since Yu said so, even if they don't believe it, they can only believe it. Otherwise, why would they fall out with Yu? Didn't you see the 2/10th Order Quasi-Saint beside Yu? Wen Ling, Yangqin, let's go back to Shenzhen. I'm really happy that the Heaven Wasteland Academy has given me such a big gift. In fact, I didn't expect Abyssal College to be so generous. In business, you can actually bargain. Originally, I could accept 10 secret planes. Ha ha ha. Puff. Hearing Yu's words, countless big shots of Abyssal College. Even Shura almost couldn't help but vomit blood. Yu's actions were called taking advantage of the situation and deliberately harming them. In fact, Yu couldn't help but say this sentence a long time ago. He was just spouting nonsense when he said 100 secret planes. He could definitely accept 10 secret planes. If you have similar business in the future, you still have to look for Abyssal College. They are too generous. Yu's voice came from afar. He, Wen Ling, and Yangqin had already retreated far away. However, the words he left behind made the big shots of Abyssal College very angry. Yu, I won't send you off. In the future, don't come to Abyssal College for no reason. You're the most unpopular person in Tianwang mainland. The voices of several big shots of Abyssal College sounded in Yu's ears. After leaving Abyssal College, Yu, Wen Ling, and Yangqin entered the Hichu Luoshu world. Holy Lord, have you really built a teleportation formation in those secret planes? Yangqin couldn't help but ask. This question had been bothering him for a long time. Yu looked at the two of them with a smile. Do you think it's possible? Wen Ling and Yangqin immediately shook their heads. Moreover, is Abyssal College really willing to give those 100 secret planes to us? It didn't leave any backup plans? Wen Ling added, in any case, they wouldn't believe Abyssal College. In fact, no one would believe that Abyssal College wouldn't leave any backup plans. Yu smiled faintly. So what if they have backup plans? When I entered that secret plane, it had already changed to Murong. Wen Ling and Yangqin just looked at Yu. They didn't know why Yu was so confident. However, They believed Muronyu. After all, he could comprehend the technique that tens of thousands of quasi-saint level powerhouses couldn't comprehend in such a short time. If he said that he could do anything, Wen Ling and Yang Qin would believe him. With a thought, Muronyu appeared in the holy city. Then, he left Wen Ling in the holy city. He took Yang Qin and several other quasi-saint experts who were good at formations and many materials to build a teleportation formation and reappeared in one of the 100 secret planes. Muronyu, this little bastard, can really enter those 100 secret planes? In just an hour, he built a teleportation formation. When Muronyu entered the secret plane, some big shots of Abyssal College talked with each other. Apart from the teleportation formation that we secretly left, it's impossible to enter. Even if we found the location of these secret planes, the entrances and exits have been completely sealed. It's basically impossible for Muronyu to enter. It's impossible to build a teleportation formation in an hour, unless he brought a lot of powerhouses with him. However, even if that's the case, we can only keep them in the secret plane. Do you want to go in and take a look? Not for the time being. Otherwise, if we're discovered, we'll be accused of being immoral. Puff! Just as they were talking, a secret teleportation formation broke through and was destroyed. Huh? What's going on? This is one of the 100 secret planes. Did Murongyu's people find it inside? While many big shots of Abyssal College were surprised, all the teleportation formations in this secret plane were destroyed one after another. These were the backup plans that Heaven Wasteland Academy had secretly left behind. At this time, after all of them were destroyed, they couldn't enter those secret planes. Maybe it's a fluke. Everyone secretly thought in their hearts. But half a day later, another teleportation formation in a secret plane was destroyed. In the following time, at the speed of destroying one secret plane in half a day, all the teleportation formations in the 100 secret planes at Abyssal College gave to Muronyu were destroyed. 2 months later, Muronyu destroyed the last teleportation formation in the secret plane with a punch. It's finally done. Abyssal College, hee hee. These teleportation formations arranged by Abyssal College were in extremely secret places. If it were anyone else, even a 10th order quasi-saint, it would be impossible to discover them so quickly. But Muronyu was different. He was proficient in the law of space. And no matter how secret the teleportation formation was, it would emit a unique fluctuation that could be felt by Muronyu from a great distance. Therefore, destroying these teleportation formations was as easy as blowing off dust for him. In the process, the powerhouses of Shenzhen began to build the teleportation formations. In the end, Muronyu was still a little worried. He carefully checked all the secret areas again and only gave up when he found that there were no more traps left behind by the Heaven Wasteland Academy. However, in the process, he also had a quite detailed understanding of these secret planes. Of the 100 secret planes, none of them were useful to him at all. But he could let the disciples of Shenzhen come in to gain experience. For them, these 100 secret planes were holy places for cultivation. Now, all that's left is the teleportation formation. Once all the teleportation formations are built, it's time to go to the Heavenly Punishment Palace, Immortal Palace, and other forces' treasure vaults. Muronyu appeared in the Holy City. In the past 2 months, he constantly teleported between the Holy City and the secret planes. This was because he wanted to adjust the teleportation formations. Chapter 1069. After spending a few months, Muronyu finally set up 100 teleportation arrays in the secret plane. At the same time, he also set the qualifications to enter the secret plane. During this process, because of the demon clan's decapitation operation, there were constant rumors in the realm of the gods about the death of experts at the level of sect masters. Most of the experts who died were not at the level of quasi-saint. These people were either ambushed and killed outside, or killed directly within their own forces. Of course, with quasi-saint level forces, the experts of the demon clan did not dare to rush in and kill, because if they were not careful, they would be killed instead. In fact, it was not that the experts of the demon clan had not tried to kill the forces with quasi-saint level forces. However, they had never succeeded. There were even a few quasi-sane of the demon clan who were killed because of this. In addition to the experts of a human clan who were constantly killed, the experts of the demon clan who exposed their identities usually did not have a good ending and were killed one after another. However, the demon clan's decapitation operation still angered the experts of the human clan. In the 4 continents, countless super experts of the super forces gathered spontaneously to discuss whether they should also kill the demon clan and carry out the decapitation operation. On this day, Muronyu received a message from Fangua. He immediately went to the floating mountain. Just as he came out of the Hichu Luoshu, Muronyu was shocked, because at this moment, there were dozens of incomparably powerful auras soaring into the sky from the floating mountain. Dozens of quasi-saint level experts, and they were not the 20 or so quasi-saint that appeared at the wedding. What are they doing? Muronyu was puzzled as he strode into the main hall of the Fan clan. In the main hall, Fangua sat on the main seat, and dozens of quasi-saint level experts sat on both sides of the main hall. Other than the Fan clan and Fan Shao, Muronyu did not know anyone else. Uncle, is this a big operation? Muronyu sized up the quasi-saint experts in the hall, then looked at Fangua. Fangua gestured for Muronyu to take a seat before he slowly said, "Everyone, this is the sovereign of the Chaos Shenzhen. Muronyu, these are some quasi-saint level human experts. They are." Fangua and Muronyu sat down and introduced each and every one of them. Muronyu also cupped his fists and saluted them one by one. Although these people were all at the level of quasi-saint, they were far stronger than Muronyu. However, he would not be arrogant and disdainful of Muronyu. In fact, if Muronyu had not subdued Wen Ling and the others, these quasi-saint might not have even looked at him. After all, this was a world where the one with the biggest fist was the truth. Now, although Muronyu's strength was far from theirs, he had 10 quasi-saint experts under him, and the weakest of the 10 quasi-saint experts was a quasi-saint of the 7th rank. Although these people present were all quasi-saint experts, there were very few above the 7th rank. After all, demi-saints were not common to begin with. They were extremely rare to begin with, and the higher the rank, the fewer of them there were. We are preparing to go to the Devil Race's territory to execute the beheading operation. After the introductions, Fangua said in a deep voice. He had always been a person who held grudges and protected his people. During Fantong's wedding, he had been tricked by the Devil Race and almost wiped out. He had been holding back this anger. It was only because Fantong had just gotten married that he did not seek revenge. But now that so many years had passed, and with the Devil Race's beheading operation, Fangua could not help but make a move. Muronyu frowned slightly. If he wanted to make a move, he needed to have extremely strong intelligence as a backing. This was the difference between humans and Devil Race. The Devil Race could easily infiltrate humans and obtain intelligence. But it was extremely difficult for humans to infiltrate the Devil Race. Without intelligence, it was extremely difficult to execute the beheading operation, because there was no target for you to behead. I have intelligence, but I need your help. Fangua looked at Muronyu. Murongyu's heart moved, and he immediately said, Shenzhen's quasi-saint experts can be divided in half. The other half needs to be in Shenzhen. Fangua immediately smiled. The beheading operation only needs a few dozen of us. We don't need Shenzhen's quasi-saint experts. We are borrowing your divine artifact to help us conceal ourselves. The experts of the quasi-saint level in the God realm usually had extremely powerful spatial divine artifacts that could carry living people. However, no divine artifact or divine artifact had the ability of Hichu Luoshu. It could teleport at any time. And most importantly, Fangua valued Murongyu's ability to ignore formations more. When he was in the Great Void exterminating deity formation, Murongyu could not ignore the formation. That was because the Great Void exterminating deity formation was activated, and its power was violent, and even his power was sealed. If the Great Void exterminating deity formation was not activated, it would naturally have no effect on Murong-yu. In fact, the formations that allowed Murong-yu to freely travel through them hadn't been activated yet. Okay, Murong-yu agreed without hesitation. This time, if he went to the devil race to execute the beheading operation, it would be a good opportunity for him to increase his resources by a large amount. As long as he was in the devil race's territory, he would be able to meet various forces. And with his movement skills, he would be able to easily find out the location of these forces' treasure vaults. Then, he would be able to empty these treasure vaults directly. When do we take action? If you have nothing else, we can set off immediately. Murong-yu nodded, no problem. But wait for me for a while. As he spoke, his figure flashed, and he disappeared from the spot. Seeing Murong-yu disappear, other than the people from the fan family, everyone present was shocked, because the Murong-yu they saw had indeed disappeared into thin air. So magical? Could it be because of the divine artifact? Everyone looked at each other, not knowing how Murong-yu disappeared. Seeing this scene, Fangua laughed in his heart. There are more magical things you will see later. Just as everyone was puzzled, Murong-yu once again strode in from outside the hall. Uncle, I think you all still need to enter my divine artifact, Murong-yu said immediately after returning. Fangua nodded, at the same time looking at the other quasi-saint present. Everyone, follow me into Murong-yu's divine artifact. Don't worry, Murong-yu will not harm you. Seeing that some people were hesitant, Fangua could not help but explain. Those who showed hesitation on their faces couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Thinking about it, Fangua had no reason to harm them, right? So they relaxed. In the next moment, a force acted on them. No one resisted, so everyone entered the Hichu Luoshu world. Murong-yu's heart moved, and in the next moment, they appeared in one of the top 10 cities of the devil race, Qingcheng City. Uncle, now that we are in Qingcheng City, what should we do next? Murong-yu asked. Apart from the three from the fan family, all the other quasi-saint were shocked. Just a moment ago, they were still in the floating mountain, and in the next moment, they were in Qingcheng City in the devil race's territory. What was going on? Could it be that Murong-yu was spouting nonsense? Suddenly, all the quasi-saint looked at Murong-yu suspiciously. Murong-yu was too lazy to explain. He did not even look at them, only looking at Fangua. Do you see the mansion in Qingcheng City with the two beast god statues in front of the door? Let's go to that mansion now. Murong-yu's divine telekinesis spread out, and in an instant he saw the mansion that Fangua had mentioned. Then, he controlled the Hichu Luoshu to fly above the mansion. There's a quasi-saint level powerhouse here. After approaching the sky, Murong-yu sensed a quasi-saint level aura. However, this aura was very sensitive. If not for his mastery of the laws of space, he would not have been able to sense this person's existence. This person was not an ordinary quasi-saint, but an assassin-type existence. He was probably hiding in the void right now. This is a branch of the Beast God Soul. The Beast God Soul is the most powerful assassin organization in the devil race's territory, equivalent to the Spectre in the human territory. The information we need is on this person. Fangua said in a low voice. Is he one of us? One of the quasi-saint could not help but ask. Not at all. This person is a genuine quasi-saint of the devil race. There's no way he would cooperate with them. We just need to subdue and control him. Fangua said calmly, while glancing at Murong-yu. It was because of Murong-yu that Fangua dared to come here directly. Otherwise, if Murong-yu wasn't there, their arrival would have definitely aroused that person's vigilance. They would not even be able to find this person's hiding place. He's in that room. Later, all of you will attack at the same time and subdue that person. Uncle, just take control of his soul. Murong-yu opened his eyes and saw the quasi-saint of the devil race hiding in one of the rooms. At the same time, he opened a corner of the Hichu Luoshu so that everyone could see the scene below. However, what made the quasi-saint suspicious was that they could not sense the presence of anyone in the room at all. Don't be suspicious, just do as I say. Fangua was convinced. Everyone was still in disbelief. They were all quasi-saint level existences, but even they could not sense anything strange. How could a heavenly king like Murong you see the person hiding inside? You guys attack first and seal the void. Then subdue that person and capture him. Murong you, once you capture that person, leave Qingcheng immediately. Fang was said in a low voice. Everyone nodded. Attack. Following Fang's command, dozens of quasi-saint moved at the same time and blasted out their strongest power. The terrifying power was like a raging wave that instantly flooded and sealed the room where the quasi-saint of the beast god's soul was. Roar. A furious roar was heard. In the next moment, the dozens of quasi-saint of Hichu Luoshu saw a figure fall out of the void. Chapter 1070. There really was someone. Seeing the figure fall out of the void due to the attack, the many powerhouses in the Hichu Luoshu were shocked. Originally, even though Fangua had told them to believe in Morongyu, they were still doubtful. However, they were still somewhat skeptical. It wasn't that they didn't want to believe it, but it was just too unbelievable. But now they believed it. After seeing the quasi-saint in the beast god's soul, they no longer held back and blasted out all of their power. The strongest power of dozens of quasi-saint. The powerhouse in the beast god's soul was only a rank 1 quasi-saint. How could he be a match for them? In the blink of an eye, he had been sealed. Then, Fangor reached out and grabbed the powerhouse into the Hichu Luoshu world. The moment the powerhouse was caught in the Hichu Luoshu world, Murong Yu controlled the Hichu Luoshu and disappeared. At this moment, the others in the beast god's soul finally reacted. However, Murong Yu and the others had already run away. Because the quasi-saint was sealed, and because the difference in power between him and Fangua was too great, Fangua controlled his soul. Fangua had directly taken control of his soul. There was no suspense at all. However, other than the 3 from the Fan family, the others looked at Murong Yu with puzzled eyes. This was the first time they looked at Murong Yu seriously. Previously, it was only because Murong Yu had a quasi-saint as his subordinate. He directly teleported from human territory to the Qingcheng city of the demon clan and even subdued 10 quasi-saint powerhouses. He can even see the powerhouses hidden in the void that even we can't see. This is only the Heavenly King stage. If he reaches the quasi-saint stage, how heaven-defying will he be? The quasi-saint powerhouses looked at Murong Yu and pondered. Although they might not admit that Murong Yu was on the same level as them, at least they were looking at him in the eye. Uncle, what should we do next? Seeing that Fangua had successfully controlled the quasi-saint in the beast god's soul, Murong Yu immediately asked. This person's memory is enormous. I need to organize his memories. Then we'll filter our targets, Fangua said, then sat down cross-legged. As the most powerful assassin organization in the Demon Clan, he was the leader of a branch. This person definitely knew the headquarters and branches of many of the major Yao factions. He was probably one of the more important experts. Controlling him was equivalent to controlling part of the beast god's soul's information. Murong Yu nodded. With a thought, Hichu Luoshu once again returned to the sky above the beast god's soul branch. At this moment, the beast god's soul was still in a mess. Murong Yu chuckled and stepped out of the Hichu Luoshu, hiding in the void. Then, he seriously sensed it. It didn't take long for him to sense the fluctuations of many formations. Immediately, he sped up and rushed toward the place where a large number of formation fluctuations were surging. The beast god's soul's treasury should be up ahead. Murong Yu sneered as he looked at the forbidden area filled with formations and restrictions. Then he took a step forward. The array didn't obstruct Murong Yu in the slightest, allowing him to easily enter the treasury. The treasury was huge, and there were many hidden treasures inside. However, Murong Yu did not have time to look at them. Instead, he directly summoned the Hichu Luoshu and enveloped the entire treasury. An enormous suction force acted on the treasury. Immediately, everything in the treasury was quickly absorbed by the Hichu Luoshu. Murong Yu walked up level by level. Everywhere he passed, he collected everything that could be moved into the Hichu Luoshu world. Half a day later, the beast god soul's treasury was emptied. Not a single immortal pill was left behind. When Muronyu re-entered the Hichu Luoshu world, Fangua coincidentally opened his eyes. He must have sorted out the memories of the quasi-saint in the beast god's soul. I have already selected 10 super forces. These super forces are the second-tier forces in the demon territory. Fangua gathered everyone and told them about the forces he was going to make a move on. Within the demon territory, the Celestial Palace ruled almost the entire demon territory. However, like the Yin Huang Immortal Realm, the Celestial Palace did not rule the demon territory. Instead, it existed as the strongest force in the demon territory. Besides the Celestial Palace, there were many other forces. If the Celestial Palace ordered, these people would all obey the orders of the Celestial Palace. However, if there were no orders, these forces would exist independently. Moreover, the Celestial Palace would never interfere in the fights between these forces. As the saying went, the winner was king. The person or force that survived was the strongest. Therefore, there were many forces being destroyed within the demon territory every day. At the same time, there were countless forces that rose to power. However, these super forces were extremely difficult to destroy. Flying Cloud Cliff, Sky Bearing Island, Red Lunar Prison was a second-tier super force. These forces were extremely strong. Each of them had a quasi-saint level expert. However, each force did not have many quasi-saint level experts. After all, there were not many quasi-saint in the entire immortal realm. If each force had dozens of quasi-saint, it would be too powerful. Our first target is Flying Cloud Cliff. What do you all think? Fangua looked at the crowd and asked, should we just kill their leader or wipe out their entire force? If we destroy the entire force, the demon tribe will be more intimidated than killing their sect leader, a quasi-saint asked. The demon tribe and the human tribe will go to war sooner or later. Either the human tribe will be destroyed or the demon tribe will be wiped out. In the end, there will only be one tribe left. Since that is the case, let's just destroy the entire demon tribe, another quasi-saint said with a murderous look. What do you all think? Should we kill the leader or destroy the entire force? In the end, the crowd decided to destroy the entire force. Then, Fangua left Hichu Luoshu and rushed to Flying Cloud Cliff alone. Hichu Luoshu was attached to Fangua's body. Fangua was a rank 10 quasi-saint. After he simulated his power into demon aura, his demon aura soared to the sky. It was extremely terrifying. Moreover, he did not stay in one place for too long. Therefore, no one could see through his identity. Flying and teleporting. After a long time, they finally arrived at Flying Cloud Cliff. Flying Cloud Cliff was the name of a sect and also a place. It was only when they saw Flying Cloud Cliff that Muronyu understood what a cliff was. The Flying Cloud Cliff was like a conical object. The tip of the cone was on the ground. It was so small that one person could carry it. However, as they looked up, it became bigger and bigger. Above the sky, above the clouds, it had become extremely huge. It was like a continent. How could such a small tip support such a huge continent? Seeing this scene, Muronyu and the others were stunned. However, they were only slightly surprised. The floating mountain was still suspended in the sky. It was even more mysterious than Flying Cloud Cliff. I wonder if we can destroy it? A quasi-saint walked out from the Hichu Luoshu world and wanted to get closer. However, before he could get close, he was blocked by an invisible force. Formation. Restriction. Flying Cloud Cliff is like the floating mountain. If you want to enter, you can only teleport in. Otherwise, you can't get close at all, Fangua said in a low voice. At the same time, he looked at Muronyu. He felt that it was a wise decision to bring Muronyu here. Otherwise, not to mention coming to Flying Cloud Cliff, they wouldn't even be able to go to Qingchang City and capture the quasi-saint in the beast god soul. However, the others didn't believe it. One by one, they transformed their auras and rushed out from the Hichu Luoshu world. They wanted to get closer. However, including Fangua and the Fan Clan. They couldn't get close to Flying Cloud Cliff. The power of the restrictions and formations on Flying Cloud Cliff was simply too strong. The moment they got close, they would be detected. If they wanted to charge over, the rebound force would be even more terrifying. I'll try. Without waiting for Fangua to speak, Moronyu kept them in the Hichu Luoshu world. Then he turned invisible in the void and flew up to Flying Cloud Cliff. Can Moronyu really go in? The dozens of quasi-saint looked at each other. They didn't believe that Moronyu could go in. After all, their quasi-saint and even the 10th rank quasi-saint couldn't go in. Moreover, Moronyu is just a mere heavenly king. No one believed that Moronyu could go in. Hichu, do you think we can take Flying Cloud Cliff? If we can move it up there. I'm not very satisfied with the location of the holy city. Moronyu asked Hichu in his mind as they flew. It's not impossible, but we need to try. After all, you're still too weak and can't unleash much of Hichu Luoshu's power. Hichu replied, even if it's possible, we still have to try. Moronyu and Hichu chatted as they talked about the countless formations and restrictions. Not long after, he appeared in the sky above Flying Cloud Cliff. When Moronyu spread out his divine sense, he didn't see any disciples patrolling the Flying Cloud Cliff. In fact, this place was as safe as the floating mountain range. If they didn't encounter Moronyu, no one would be able to get close, and no one would be able to barge in. Uncle, I've already gone in. As he spoke, Moronyu opened a corner of Hichu Luoshu. You really went in? When they saw the scenery outside Flying Cloud Cliff, the dozens of quasi-saint in Hichu Luoshu were instantly stunned. Who was this Moronyu? Why was his strength so low, but his ability so heaven-defying? The many quasi-saint were incomparably shocked. They all looked at Moronyu in shock and disbelief. It was as if they wanted to see through Moronyu. Let us out, we'll slaughter this Flying Cloud Cliff today. Fangua shouted in a low voice. Then he rushed out of Hichu Luoshu, and the others followed suit. After Fangua and the others appeared, they shot toward the depths of Flying Cloud Cliff. At the same time, Moronyu followed. However, his goal wasn't to kill, but to target the treasure vault of Flying Cloud Cliff. Chapter 1071. As soon as Fangua and the rest appeared, they unleashed their strongest aura. In an instant, the entire Flying Cloud Cliff was shrouded in a terrifying aura. Moreover, Fangua and the rest were here to kill. Therefore, their powerful aura contained a terrifying killing intent. Bang, bang, bang. Wherever they passed, countless buildings, trees, and even the disciples of the Flying Cloud Cliff could not withstand the force and exploded into pieces. They suddenly suffered a sneak attack that they had never experienced before. Many disciples of Flying Cloud Cliff, including the higher-ups, were stunned. They did not know what had happened, where these people came from, and why they attacked Flying Cloud Cliff. Did they not know that Flying Cloud Cliff was one of the most powerful forces of the Monster Clan? Who dares to behave atrociously at Flying Cloud Cliff? Just as everyone was wondering how these people could kill their way up, the experts of Flying Cloud Cliff had already rushed into the sky and pounced on Fangua and the rest. Fangua and the rest sneered. They stretched out their hands, which turned into the size of a mountain and slammed down. Rumble, the sky was instantly shattered. The experts of Flying Cloud Cliff who rushed out were blasted into dust before they could even react. At the same time, Fangua and the rest began a large-scale attack. Their hands slammed down one by one, covering the entire Flying Cloud Cliff in an instant. With one slap, countless disciples of Flying Cloud Cliff were killed. In a few breaths' time, 80% of Flying Cloud Cliff's disciples were killed. At this time, the only 5 quasi-saint on Flying Cloud Cliff finally woke up from their deep seclusion. Kill! They roared and charged toward Fangua and the rest. However, before they could reach them, Fangua and the other dozens of quasi-saint struck out their hands at the same time. Bang! One of the quasi-saint only had time to strike out his hand to block the terrifying power. However, he did not even have time to retreat before he was blasted into a cloud of blood mist. Even his godhead was shattered. After all, dozens of quasi-saint attacked at the same time. One could imagine how terrifying their power was. The remaining 4 quasi-saint were scared half to death. They immediately retreated. Kill! Fangua and the others roared. They locked onto a target and attacked again. On average, each quasi-saint on Flying Cloud Cliff had to face over 10 human quasi-saints. How could they dare to resist? He couldn't resist it either. Immediately, they chose to retreat at the first possible moment. Although they were furious that Fangua and the others had ambushed them and killed countless Flying Cloud Cliff disciples. However, they didn't want to put themselves in danger. While Fangua and the others were attacking Flying Cloud Cliff, Moronyu had already sneaked into Flying Cloud Cliff's treasury. Originally, Flying Cloud Cliff's treasury was guarded by a quasi-saint level expert. Quasi-saint's divine telekinesis covered the entire entrance to the treasury. If this continued, Moronyu would not have the opportunity to enter the treasury. They might even be discovered before they even got close. After all, this was quasi-saint. Even with his invisibility ability, he still had to be careful. Under normal circumstances, he might be able to sneak in if he was a little more careful. However, he didn't have the time now. However, the strength of Fangua and the others was too terrifying. Immediately, the quasi-saint guarding the treasury rushed out. This allowed Moronyu to enter the treasury easily. As a second-tier superpower of the demon race, Flying Cloud Cliff's treasury was the largest and most treasures Moronyu had ever seen. Even the Blood Sect, the Divine Union, and the Shadowless Organization couldn't compare. Flying Cloud Cliff's treasury is better than the Heaven Punisher palaces. The treasury of the Immortal Palace, the Devil Sect, and the Sacred Sect combined is several times stronger. This trip to the demon race is worth it. Moronyu laughed in his heart. However, he had already taken out the Hichu Luoshu and started to absorb the treasures frantically. Moronyu didn't let go of anything in the treasury, even if it was an ordinary stone. He collected everything. By the time Moronyu emptied the treasury, the energy fluctuations outside had also gradually weakened. In fact, they had even disappeared. The Flying Cloud Cliff must have been completely destroyed. With a thought, Moronyu appeared outside the treasury. At the moment, Fangua and the other human tribe quasi-saint were all floating on the ground. Moronyu also appeared and stood in the air. The smell of blood was very pungent and unpleasant. When he spread out his spiritual consciousness, he realized that there were no other living people in the entire Flying Cloud Cliff except for the few dozen of them. There were only dead bodies of the demon race. In response, Moronyu merely looked on with indifference. Many of the disciples below were innocent. However, many factions of the human race had also been massacred by the demon race. Furthermore, once a war between the two races broke out, it wouldn't just be one sect that would die. It would only end when one side was annihilated. No matter what world it is, the powerhouses standing at the top of the pyramid are the ones who dominate everything. There should be at least tens of millions of disciples in the Flying Cloud Cliff, right? However, under the attack of dozens of quasi-saint, they were all killed in less than half a day. Moronyu thought to himself, and the thought of increasing his strength became more and more intense. Once a war breaks out between the two races, I don't know if this will happen again. Will the quasi-saint from one side kill the gods of the lower realms wantonly, or will they not be able to interfere in the war? While Moronyu was pondering, Fangua and the others had already flown towards the treasury of the Flying Cloud Cliff. Moronyu followed them silently. At this moment, he wouldn't be honest with them and tell them not to go, because he had already emptied the treasury. As long as it was in Moronyu's possession, he would never hand it over. Moreover, he wouldn't admit that he was the one who emptied the treasury of the Flying Cloud Cliff. Since dozens of quasi-saint and the Flying Cloud Cliff were wiped out, the formations and restrictions in the treasury of the Flying Cloud Cliff were naturally not a problem for them. Very quickly, they broke through them violently. What's going on? An empty treasury? Seeing that the treasury was so clean that not a single pill was left behind, everyone frowned slightly. Could it be that someone from the flying cloud cliff ran away with the treasures? Impossible. This place is so clean that nothing is left behind. Does it look like someone ran away with the treasures in a hurry? A quasi-saint immediately said, "Could it be that this isn't the treasury of the flying cloud cliff?" Someone frowned and asked. At this moment, Murong Yu was inwardly elated. Since the quasi-saint denied that someone had run away with the treasures in a hurry, he naturally ruled him out. Now, even if Murong Yu said that he was the one who emptied the treasury, they probably wouldn't believe him. This was because even they couldn't move everything in half a day without leaving even a strand of hair behind. Maybe this really isn't the treasury of the flying cloud cliff. Let's go somewhere else to take a look, a quasi-saint said unhappily. Then, he turned around and left. Immediately, the others also left and began to search for the so-called treasury of the flying cloud cliff. However, even if they dug 3 feet into the ground, they still couldn't find the treasury. This was because the flying cloud cliff was the treasury, but it had been emptied by Murong Yu. Maybe the treasury of the flying cloud cliff doesn't have a treasury at all, or maybe it was really taken away by someone. Let's go to another big faction. A quasi-saint looked at Fangua. Fangua nodded and looked at Murong Yu. Murong Yu pondered for a moment and finally decided to ask Fangua and the others for help. Therefore, he said, "Uncle, seniors, I want to take away the flying cloud cliff. I wonder if you're willing to help me?" Hearing this, everyone looked at Murong Yu in shock. They had never thought of taking away the flying cloud cliff. This was because it was impossible, especially Fangua. The flying cloud cliff was the same as the floating mountain. As the master of the floating mountain, he knew how terrifying the floating mountain was. It was impossible to take it away. Are you confident you can take it? Fangua looked at Murong Yu. Murong Yu smiled embarrassedly. How can I be confident? I just want to try. In that case, there's no harm in giving it a try. If you can really take it away, it'll be a good thing. Otherwise, it'll be too easy for the demons. A quasi-saint said. Then I'll thank you seniors in advance. Now, I'll bring you out. As he spoke, Murong Yu swept them into the Hichu Luoshu world, then appeared outside and flew to the sky above the flying cloud cliff. Murong Yu, how do you want to help? Fangua and the others appeared beside Murong Yu. Seniors, you just need to lend me some of your power temporarily. As he spoke, Murong Yu had already brought out the Hichu Luoshu. The Hichu Luoshu expanded with the wind, and under Murong Yu's urging, it quickly enveloped the flying cloud cliff. Seniors, lend me a hand. At this moment, Murong Yu suddenly roared. Fangua and the others immediately poured their power into Murong Yu's body. During this process, Murong Yu also directly extracted the power of Wen Ling and the others. As long as he used the swordsman formula to control an expert, Murong Yu could directly borrow their power. Whoosh! The Hichu Luoshu instantly enlarged, enveloping the entire flying cloud cliff. Withdraw! Murong Yu roared fiercely. Instantly, an incomparably powerful force erupted from the Hichu Luoshu, enveloping the entire flying cloud cliff. Rumble! The flying cloud cliff fiercely shook, but it was not pulled in. The first attempt had failed. Primal Chaos God Vein, burn for me! Murong Yu roared angrily. Immediately, a huge amount of Primal Chaos God Vein began to burn crazily in the Hichu Luoshu. Immediately, the suction force of the Hichu Luoshu began to increase by trillions of times. Withdraw! Murong Yu roared, using all his strength to control the Hichu Luoshu to withdraw the flying cloud cliff. Under this terrifying suction force, the flying cloud cliff began to shake. At first, it only shook slightly, but later on, the shaking became faster and faster, as if it was about to be uprooted. Chapter 1072. A huge suction force was constantly emitted from the Hichu Luoshu world, enveloping the entire flying cloud cliff. Under this terrifying suction force, the entire flying cloud cliff began to shake rapidly. However, it seemed that the suction force was not enough. The flying cloud cliff felt like it was being uprooted from the ground, but it was not really uprooted. At the same time, the formations on the flying cloud cliff began to be activated. Beams of divine light constantly erupted, producing a great power that directly resisted the power of the He2 and the inscription of the Luo, making it even more difficult for the He2 and the inscription of the Luo to absorb the flying cloud cliff. Morongyu, speed up. Otherwise, the experts of the Demon Clan will hear the news and come here soon. At this moment, Fangua's voice rang in Morongyu's ears. Morongyu felt helpless. Now, whether it was his own strength, borrowing the strength of others, or even directly burning the power of the endless chaotic divine veins, these had reached the peak of what he could use. If it still did not work, he would have to give up the flying cloud cliff. Everyone, lend me a hand again. Morongyu roared and decided to try again. If it still did not work, he would have to give up. The power of many quasi-saint burst out and poured into Morongyu's body. With everyone's ultimate strength, the suction force of the Hichu Luoshu became even stronger. However, the flying cloud cliff was still rumbling, but it was not uprooted. Perhaps the flying cloud cliff was too heavy, or perhaps the formations on the flying cloud cliff were too strong. Do I have to give up? Morongyu felt helpless and finally gave up. If dozens of quasi-saint strength is not enough, do I need hundreds of quasi-saint strength? But there are too many quasi-saints, and it exceeds my limit. I can't borrow their strength at all. Morongyu felt depressed and took Fangua and the others into the Hichu Luoshu world. Just as Morongyu entered the Hichu Luoshu and was about to leave, Hichu suddenly said, "Maybe there is another way." "What is it?" Morongyu immediately asked. He was determined to obtain this flying cloud cliff. If not for the fact that there was no other way, he would not have given up. Lu Haotsong, he's an imperishable stage saint. If he's willing to help, a mere flying cloud cliff is nothing. Morongyu was puzzled. You also know that he's an imperishable stage sage. There was no way the God Realm could contain him. If he appeared here, I'm afraid the entire flying cloud cliff would be shattered. When he said this, a light suddenly flashed through his mind. If Lu Haotsong is in the Hichu Luoshu world, don't even think about it. When he entered Hichu Luoshu, the Hichu Luoshu itself would not be harmed. However, the space inside the Hichu Luoshu would definitely be shattered and return to chaos. Once it returns to chaos, it's impossible for you to recreate the world with your current strength. Moreover, even if you can create it, all the previous teleportation points and other things will disappear. Morongyu was depressed, but after a while, he appeared in the chaotic secret land. Boy, don't tell me you're going to break through again this time. As soon as Morongyu appeared, Lu Haotsong, who had nothing to do, noticed him and went directly to Morongyu's side. Morongyu shook his head. No, I want to borrow something from you this time. What? I don't have anything now. Lu Haotsong looked at Morongyu in confusion, not knowing what he wanted to borrow. Power. Lu Haotsong laughed. How can I lend you my power? Besides, even if I lend it to you, you won't be able to bear it. I just need you to reach the level of a false saint. Help me collect something. Morongyu said lightly. How? You don't want me to help you kill people, do you? I won't help you with your grievances. I can kill my enemies myself. I don't need you. It's just collecting something. Now, you can condense the power of a false saint and hide in the Hichu Luoshu world. When the time comes, help me collect it. The strength of a false saint. You're really greedy. In this godforsaken place, even exhaling a breath is a waste. The power of a false saint is too great. Morongyu looked at Lu Haotsong. If you want to stay here forever, you don't have to give it to me. A threat. It was definitely a threat. However, it just so happened to threaten Lu Haotsong's weakness. It had always been Lu Haotsong's wish to leave the chaotic secret land and return to the holy world. And the only person who could help him achieve this wish was Morongyu. If Morongyu really didn't take him away, he could only stay here forever. Immediately, Lu Haozong laughed and said quickly, "Isn't it just the power of a false saint? I'll give it to you." As he spoke, Lu Haozong immediately condensed a power clone with the strength of a false saint. Murong smiled faintly and immediately entered the Hichu Luo Shu. At the same time, he took Lu Haozong's power clone. The next moment, he appeared above the flying cloud cliff. "Old Lu, your task is to capture the flying cloud cliff and bring it to the Hichu Luo Shu world," Murong said to Lu Haozong's clone with a smile. Because Lu Haozong left a divine thought in the power clone, it was the same as his original body. Immediately, he frowned and said, "No matter how many false saints there are, they can't capture the flying cloud cliff, let alone a quasi-saint. Unless it's a real saint." Murong's brows slightly wrinkled, but he quickly let it go. If it weren't for this, the flying cloud cliff and the floating mountain would have been smashed by the false saints in the divine world long ago. "Old Lu, I know you have a way. I'll leave this task to you." Murong just looked at Lu Haozong with a smile. "If I unleash the strength of a saint, I can capture the flying cloud cliff. If it was under normal circumstances, it wouldn't matter at all. But now, every bit of power consumed is consumed, and it can't be replenished." Seeing that Lu Haozong was about to go on, Murong directly interrupted him. "It seems that someone doesn't want to go back to the holy world. You're ruthless. I'll help you get the flying cloud cliff now." After being threatened by Murong, Lu Haozong finally decided to help Murong regardless of the consumption of power. Anyway, even if he had no power, he wouldn't die. Of course, the premise was that his physical body didn't collapse. "Boy, after I make a move, this power clone will collapse. You must remember to take me out of the chaotic secret plane." Lu Haozong shouted in a low voice, and at the same time, his aura began to rise. "False saint, saint!" Boom! Just as his aura rose to that of a sage, the space within he too and Luo Shu that he was in began to collapse in large areas. Moreover, this collapse was different from ordinary collapse. After the collapse, it was not repaired, but began to transform into pieces of chaos. Lu Haozong also knew that the Hichu Luo Shu world couldn't bear the power of a saint. Therefore, he didn't talk nonsense, and directly stretched out his big hand from a Hichu Luo Shu. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Lu Haozong's method was very simple. He merely used his palm to chop Fei, union up, down, left, and right a few times. However, Murong watched as the void was directly split apart, turning into a mass of primal chaos. At this time, the flying cloud cliff was like a mountain wrapped in endless chaos and was directly isolated from the divine world. In this way, without the support of the divine world, the flying cloud cliff's formation couldn't be activated no matter how powerful it was. Whoosh! Lu Haozong stretched out his big hand and directly grabbed the entire flying cloud cliff. At the same time, Murong also took out the Hichu Luo Shu. The Hichu Luo Shu expanded with the wind, and very quickly it covered the sky and earth, opening up a hole even bigger than the flying cloud cliff. With a whoosh, the flying cloud cliff was pulled into the Hichu Luo Shu world by Lu Haozong. The moment the flying cloud cliff entered the Hichu Luo Shu, Lu Haozong's strength clone also collapsed instantly. The space in the Hichu Luo Shu couldn't hold on for much longer, because in just a moment, 1/10 of the space in the Hichu Luo Shu had already returned to chaos. With Murong's current strength, it would take an extremely long time to repair this 1/10 of the space that had returned to chaos. And this was because repairing was millions of times easier than creating. Boom! When the flying cloud cliff fell into the Hichu Luo Shu, the entire Hichu Luo Shu couldn't help but tremble. One could imagine how heavy the flying cloud cliff was. Although the bottom of the flying cloud cliff could be wrapped around by a person, the top of the cliff was like a small continent. It was similar to the primordial wilderness continent. With Murong's current strength, it wasn't impossible for him to move the entire primordial wilderness continent into the Hichu Luo Shu. Moreover, the primordial wilderness continent wasn't so heavy. However, the flying cloud cliff was the same as the floating mountain. It was different from ordinary continents. Therefore, even with the strength of dozens of quasi-saints combined, they couldn't move it. What's going on? Is it under attack? The violent tremors of the Hichu Luoshu were felt by everyone in the Hichu Luoshu world. However, although they were puzzled, the Hichu Luoshu world was very big. Moreover, without Morong Yu's permission, they couldn't move around freely. Therefore, they didn't see the flying cloud cliff being taken in at all. Quasi-saint. Is the difference between a false saint and a saint so big? Morong Yu was a little shocked at this moment. This was the first time he saw a saint in action. A false saint couldn't do anything to the flying cloud cliff, but a saint could take it in with a single move. The difference was too big, and Lu Haocong had only slightly exposed the strength of a saint. That was only the lowest level of a saint. What if he was in the imperishable realm? What if he was in the supremes, or even the sovereigns? How powerful were they? As for the legendary chaos controller, what kind of strength did he possess? Morong Yu was shocked. At the same time, he was even more determined to become a saint. Chapter 1073. Morong Yu, what happened just now? Was your divine artifact under attack? If there aren't many Goblin Clan enemies, we can attack. After Morong Yu appeared, Fangua asked through telepathy. The others also looked over. Morong Yu faintly smiled and said, "It's nothing. I'll just take it in the flying cloud cliff." What? Took the flying cloud cliff in? Morong Yu's words were like a boulder that had been thrown into a calm lake, causing huge waves to erupt. They had all seen it with their own eyes. The combined strength of dozens of quasi-saints could only shake the flying cloud cliff slightly. Yet, Morong Yu had managed to take the soaring cloud cliff in less than half a day without them even making a move? Who was helping him? Could it be that there was a real saint behind him? Only a real saint would have such strength. Perhaps there were hundreds or even more quasi-saints behind Morong Yu. Perhaps there were so many people who could take the flying cloud cliff. However, if Morong Yu had so many quasi-saints, why did he not expose them? With so many saints, it was enough for him to run amok in the realm of the gods. Then, there was only one possibility. There was a saint behind him. Could it be the saint from Primeval College? Everyone looked at Morong Yu with doubtful eyes. With Morong Yu's talent and performance, it was possible that the Primeval College was behind him. If it was not the saint from Primeval College, who was the saint behind Morong Yu? No matter who it was, there was a high chance that there was a saint behind Morong Yu. This person must not be offended. This thought appeared in the minds of many quasi-saints. Some of the people who originally had strange thoughts put away their strange thoughts at that moment. Looking at everyone's expressions, Morong Yu knew what was going on. He did not explain and let these people speculate. "Uncle, which force will we be facing next?" "Red Lunar Prison," Fangua said indifferently. At the same time, he left Hichu Luoshu. The Red Lunar Prison was as powerful as the Flying Cloud Cliff. It was a super force in the second tier of the Demon Clan. However, it was extremely far away from Flying Cloud Cliff. In the Demon Race's territory, there were very few teleportation points that Morong Yu could use, so he could only rely on Fangua to travel. While Fangua was rushing to Red Lunar Prison, the news that Flying Cloud Cliff had been completely destroyed and that even Flying Cloud Cliff had been taken away spread like wildfire among the demon race. Then, the news spread throughout the human territory and the entire God realm. What's the situation? Who was it that destroyed a force like Flying Cloud Cliff? Who has the ability to uproot the Flying Cloud Cliff? For a moment, countless people in the God realm were filled with doubts. On the other hand, the demon race suspected that it was the doing of a human expert. This was revenge for their decapitation. However, while the Flying Cloud Cliff was easy to destroy, the Flying Cloud Cliff was difficult to take away, especially for the demons. They were even more terrifying than Flying Cloud Cliff. Even a false saint would not be able to collect it. Who was it that took away Flying Cloud Cliff? Could it be that the higher-ups had taken it away? Or was it destroyed by a saint? This was because everyone in Flying Cloud Cliff had been killed. Not even a chicken or a dog was spared, other than those who were no longer at Flying Cloud Cliff that day. No one knew who had destroyed Flying Cloud Cliff. Just as everyone was guessing and discussing, Murong Yu and the rest appeared outside Red Lunar Prison. There was nothing special about Red Lunar Prison's location. It was similar to an ordinary sect, and there were no layers of formations like Flying Cloud Cliff. Therefore, Fangua led Hichu Luoshu and rushed forward. Kill! Fangua bellowed out as he punched out with his fist. A terrifying power burst out and almost annihilated the defenseless Red Lunar Prison. If not for the fact that there were many formations in Red Lunar Prison that would automatically activate after being attacked. Otherwise, Fangua's punch would have raised the entire Red Lunar Prison to the ground. During this process, the other dozens of Quasi-Saint came out of Hichu, Luoshu, and attacked crazily the moment they came out. Murong Yu still did not come out. Regarding this, the other Quasi-Saint did not say anything. After all, he was only a heavenly king. Not only would he not be able to help, but he would also be a burden to them. Swoosh! After everyone left, Murong Yu began to search for Red Lunar Prison's treasure vault. Not long after, Murong Yu found Red Lunar Prison's treasure vault. The people guarding the treasure vault had all left, and those formations were useless against Murong Yu. Therefore, Murong Yu swaggered into Red Lunar Prison's treasure vault. Compared to Flying Cloud Cliff, Red Lunar Prison's treasure vault was not that big, and there were not many things inside. However, it was still very shocking. Without saying a word, Murong Yu took out Hichu Luoshu and began to collect it. Half a day later, the battle outside ended. Out of the 6 Quasi-Saint in Red Lunar Prison, 5 were killed, and 1 Quasi-Saint was severely injured. He opened a secret teleportation formation in Red Lunar Prison and escaped. Other than the Quasi-Saint who escaped, none of the disciples in Red Lunar Prison escaped. They were all killed. Blood flowed like a river, and corpses were everywhere. The entire Red Lunar Prison was almost razed to the ground. Swoosh! Murong Yu walked out of the treasure vault. At this time, Fangua and the rest were already attacking the formation of the treasure vault. He appeared from the void behind and strode forward. Red Lunar Prison's treasure vault should have many good things, right? Murong Yu stood beside Fan Shao and said to him, Red Lunar Prison has 1 more Quasi-Saint than Flying Cloud Cliff, so the treasure vault should be more than Flying Cloud Cliff. However, the last time, the Flying Cloud Cliff's treasury was emptied. Will the same thing happen this time? Murong Yu frowned. I don't think so. If that's the case, then it's really strange. As he said this, Murong Yu was secretly laughing. He had emptied Red Lunar Prison's treasure vault long ago. While they were talking, the group had already worked together to break the countless formations and restrictions in Red Lunar Prison's treasure vault. However, when they entered the treasury, each and every one of their faces turned ashen. There's really nothing? It's so clean. Could it be that the Demon Clan's treasure vault is just for show? Murong Yu frowned and said, Strange. Who exactly emptied the treasure vault? If Red Lunar Prison knew about it in advance, they would not have been defenseless. The entire sect would have been wiped out. Could it be that Murong Yu was right? Or could it be that the sage behind Murong Yu was the one who did it? However, it shouldn't be. If it was a sage, he could have taken the treasure vault openly. Why would he need to be so sneaky? Or rather, the sage actually wasn't sneaking around. It was just that they didn't discover it. If it was really a sage, then this sage was always by Murong Yu's side. Was this to protect him? No wonder Murong Yu didn't have any Quasi-Saint by his side. It turned out that there was a sage secretly protecting him. In fact, what they didn't know was that there was no sage behind Murong Yu. As for Shengzhen's Quasi-Saint, when Ling and the others were hiding in Hichu Luoshu, after all, it was so dangerous this time. Among these dozens of people, only the Fan family had a better relationship with him. He didn't have much of a relationship with the others. These people might stab him in the back. Therefore, before coming to the demon-desolate continent, Su Hao returned to Shenzhen and brought Wen Ling and the other Quasi-Saint with him in case of emergencies. However, if Murong Yu knew what they were thinking, he would definitely laugh himself to death. He would definitely be even more unscrupulous. However, at this moment, he also pretended to be extremely depressed. Since Red Lunar Prison had already been destroyed, the treasure vault had also been emptied, and Red Lunar Prison wasn't as valuable as Flying Cloud Cliff. Therefore, everyone left very quickly. After a long time, the news of Red Lunar Prison being destroyed spread. In just a short period of time, the second superforce was destroyed. After the news spread, many super forces of the demon race became vigilant, and this was completely useless. Not long after Red Lunar Prison was destroyed, Sky-bearing Island, which was also a second-tier superforce of the demon race, was also destroyed. While the demons were shocked, Fangua and the others were even more depressed. Because after destroying Sky-bearing Island this time, the treasure vault of Sky-bearing Island was still emptied. And this time, there was still a quasi-saint who went to monitor Sky-bearing Island's treasure vault before making a move. But it was useless. They couldn't find out who emptied the treasure vault at all. They destroyed 5 second-tier super forces in a row. However, in the following period of time, Fangua and the others had no choice but to stop. This was because when they destroyed the 4th super force, their quasi-saint was already severely injured. Moreover, a few quasi-saint were almost destroyed. This was because the super forces were already on their guard. They built many transportation circles between the super forces. Once they were attacked, the quasi-saint of the other super forces rushed over immediately. Moreover, these super forces had set up even more formations. Because of this, almost all of Fangua's quasi-saint died. Moreover, what made them most depressed was that after destroying 5 super forces in a row, the treasure vaults of the 5 super forces were emptied. They didn't even have a single hair. Since they couldn't continue to destroy the super forces, they started to destroy the 3rd-tier super forces. There weren't many experts in these super forces, so they were easily killed. At this moment, Fangua and the others' actions had already shocked the entire realm of gods. Especially the demon race, they were furious. The beheadings intensified, and countless human experts died. A war between the humans was about to break out. The beheadings were still being carried out to warn the others and intimidate them. However, the more they did so, the more furious the two clans were. There were even many normal human and demon experts who crossed the boundless territory of both sides and entered each other's territory to kill each other directly. The realm of gods was in chaos. At this moment, Morong Yu and the others were preparing to return. After all, the world was in chaos. They had to go back to reorganize their forces and prepare for war. Morong Yu naturally had no objection to their decision. This was because he had gained the most from this trip. Moreover, Shenzhen needed him to go back and take charge. As long as Shenzhen moved to Flying Cloud Cliff, at least in this war, Shenzhen would be able to hold on until the end. Chapter 1074. The atmosphere in the immortal realm was extremely tense. Whether it was the human race or the demon race, there would be battles that were more frequent than before. Some of them were humans slaughtering demons, while some were demons crazily attacking humans in human territory. However, there were also people or forces who were taking advantage of the situation to create chaos. In short, this was a chaotic world. Perhaps some of the top forces in the human or demon race in the immortal realm were already planning to start a civil war. However, all of this had nothing to do with Morong Yu. If there was a war between the two races, he would definitely participate. However, now was not the time. At this moment, he had already returned to the Saint City. The Flying Cloud Cliff was a small continent, but it was extremely huge. It was even bigger than the Yin Huang Immortal Realm. Moreover, when Lu Haotsong took the Flying Cloud Cliff, he did not destroy any of the spirit designs or restrictions on the Flying Cloud Cliff. Therefore, besides being very safe, the Flying Cloud Cliff did not have to worry about the heaven and earth Yuan Qi. Just like the floating mountain, the Flying Cloud Cliff would automatically absorb the heaven and earth Yuan Qi from the surroundings. Rumble. Because the Quasi-Saint was in charge of the Saint City, there was no chaos. Those who needed to do things continued to do things, and those who needed to cultivate continued to cultivate. All of a sudden, a loud bang was heard, following which the entire Saint City, and even the land within hundreds of millions of miles around the Saint City, started to tremble. It was as though the heavens and earth were falling apart. In an instant, countless people thought that the world had changed and rushed out. It was as though day had turned into night, although it was not so dark that they could not see their fingers in front of them. However, it was still as dark as night. However, everyone knew that it was only early in the morning at this time. What's going on? Is it really the end of the world? Everyone looked at each other. Then, they felt as if a huge mountain was floating above their heads, and a huge pressure shrouded their hearts. At this moment, the sky that was as dark as night gradually brightened. Everyone looked up and saw an inverted cone standing between the heavens and the earth. It grew bigger and bigger, and finally formed an endless continent above the clouds. What is this? Many people were puzzled. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang in their ears. As if it knew what they were thinking, the voice immediately answered, "This is the treasure of the Flying Cloud Cliff, one of the top forces of the demon clan. Flying Cloud Cliff. From then on, it will belong to Shenzhen, and its name will be changed to Holy Mountain. Morong, you stood at the edge of the Flying Cloud Cliff, or rather the edge of the Holy City." He looked down at the vast expanse of heaven and earth with a solemn expression. For many people, they had no idea what kind of power Flying Cloud Cliff was and how terrifying it was. But when they heard Morong Yu mention the top forces and saw the majestic aura of the sacred mountain, just this alone was enough to intimidate countless people. And Shenzhen's people were even more delighted. From today onwards, all disciples of Shenzhen will move to the holy city to live and cultivate. This will be the sacred mountain of Shenzhen and also the sacred mountain of the entire God realm. Morong Yu's voice once again spread far and wide. At the same time, the higher-ups of Shenzhen, such as Zhang Ao and Duan Muqing, also appeared. Near them was the teleportation portal to the sacred mountain. As for people like Zhao Jiqing, Wen Ling, and the others, they naturally wouldn't show their faces in public to do these things. Disciples of Shenzhen, after you pack up all your belongings, you can go to the sacred mountain through the teleportation portal, Zhang Ao shouted loudly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Before Zhang Ao's voice fell, countless disciples of Shenzhen had already rushed out. As gods, their belongings were usually in their storage rings. Therefore, there was nothing to pack. One by one, they disappeared into the teleportation portal, and Shenzhen's disciples continued to appear on the sacred mountain. Wow, the sacred mountain's scenery is so beautiful. It's just like a continent. Also, the heaven-earth origin energy here is many times denser than in the sacred mountain. It's simply a holy land for cultivation. This was the first time that those who set foot on the sacred mountain exclaimed. When these people were teleporting to the sacred mountain, when Ling and the others also took action, they used their great magical powers and directly moved many of the arrangements to the sacred mountain. For example, the secret grounds array and various other facilities. In less than half a day, the entire Shenzhen's people had all retreated to the sacred mountain. Of course, the sacred mountain still belonged to Shenzhen. Therefore, countless people who heard the news just stood outside the sacred mountain and watched Shenzhen's disciples disappear into the teleportation portal one by one. It was unknown whether it was done on purpose or not, but the various praises of Shenzhen's disciples on the sacred mountain were clearly heard, causing countless gods to be envious. Shenzhen already has a quasi-saint level expert, and now they even have a sacred mountain. It's both safe and suitable for cultivation. If only I could become Shenzhen's disciple. Unfortunately, Shenzhen's standards are too high. Someone said with a look of regret, "You just want to get benefits from Shenzhen, so naturally you won't pass their test." In my opinion, Shenzhen's standards for disciples are the lowest. As long as you're loyal to Shenzhen, no matter how strong or weak you are, or what your aptitude is, you can become their disciple. It's just that, How do they determine if a person is loyal to Shenzhen? Someone asked puzzledly. If I knew, would I still be standing here? I would already be in the sacred mountain. That person said with a black face. Now that Shenzhen's people have moved to the sacred mountain, there shouldn't be anyone willing to cultivate in the sacred mountain. I wonder if Shenzhen will leave the sacred mountain empty, or what? Everyone, from today onwards, the sacred mountain is open to the entire God realm. As long as you pay a certain amount of resources, you can live and do business in the sacred mountain. Of course, the prerequisite is that you can't cause trouble in the sacred mountain and must abide by the rules and regulations of the sacred mountain. Those who want to live and cultivate in the sacred mountain, now go find Shenzhen's disciple to settle the check-in procedures. Murong Yu's voice once again spread far and wide. It was actually such a good thing. Hearing Murong Yu's words, everyone was slightly surprised. This was because they all knew that the sacred mountain also had a spirit-gathering array, and the heaven and earth origin energy was many times denser than outside the sacred mountain. They didn't think that Murong Yu would actually open the sacred mountain. Sacred Master, if we live in the sacred mountain, will Shenzhen provide us with protection? A loud voice suddenly spread, suppressing all the voices present. As long as you abide by Shenzhen's rules and regulations, as long as you are a resident of the sacred mountain, our Shenzhen will provide protection. Murong Yu's voice spread far and wide. Then what are we still waiting for? I want to live in the sacred mountain. A heavenly emperor realm powerhouse roared angrily, unfolding his figure and pouncing toward Shenzhen. It was just that there were still quite a few people faster than him. However, although these people were in a mess, they were careful, not daring to destroy a single flower or blade of grass in the sacred mountain. If they were rejected by Shenzhen because of this, then they would regret it to death. Everyone, although the sacred mountain is only opening up half of the area this time, but there are enough seats, so everyone don't snatch. Seeing the deities flocking over, Shenzhen and the rest of those people who stayed here to handle the procedures for them were all about to burst into laughter. The sacred mountain was not opening up the sacred mountain to them for free. Want to survive here? Then they would have to spend money to buy a place. Different places had different prices. Furthermore, other than this, they also had to pay resources to Shenzhen at fixed intervals. Actually, Shenzhen was like renting out the sacred mountain. One could imagine that in the future, there would be resources rolling in every day. This was also considered one of Shenzhen's businesses. The sacred mountain was huge. The headquarters of the Divine Union was already big enough, but Shenzhen had expanded it quite a bit during this period of time. Therefore, even though only half of the city was opened up, less than half of the people stayed in it. However, when this news spread, even more people would stay in the sacred mountain in the future. At the same time, the news that the Flying Cloud Cliff had become Shenzhen's sacred mountain had also spread. No matter who it was, they were all shocked, especially the powerful existences. Those who were well aware of the terror of soaring Cloud Cliff were even more shocked by Murong Yu's generosity. The Flying Cloud Cliff actually fell into Shenzhen's hands. Where did Murong Yu get his strength from? When the news spread to the demon race, information about Murong Yu and Shenzhen was also presented to some big shots. Could it be that Murong Yu is being watched by the higher-ups? Was Flying Cloud Cliff also taken away by the higher-ups? Countless people were puzzled. More and more people suspected that there was a saint behind Su Hao. It was precisely because of this that many people became wary of Shenzhen. This mentality made the demons not dare to touch Shenzhen for a long time when humans and demons were in an all-out war. Murong Yu. Countless big shots of Abyssal College gritted their teeth. They were already unhappy with Murong Yu to begin with. And if there was really a saint behind Murong Yu, no matter how unhappy they were, they could only swallow it. While everyone's eyes were focused on Murong Yu, guessing if there was a saint behind him, Murong Yu and even the entire Shenzhen entered a cultivation frenzy. Shenzhen was still too weak. Although there was the Holy Mountain, if the war between the two races started with Shenzhen's strength, it would still be difficult to preserve it. Therefore, He needed to increase the strength of Shenzhen's disciples, because he had emptied the treasure vaults of many large factions of the demon race, such as Flying Cloud Cliff. Shenzhen's resources couldn't be calculated with numbers at all. Comprehension pills were constantly being produced. At the same time, batch after batch of Shenzhen's experts were constantly taken into the Hichu, Luoshu world by Murongyu. He activated time acceleration and crazily increased their strength. Heavenly Lord, Heavenly King, Heavenly Emperor, and even Primordial God Realm. The strength of Shenzhen's disciples increased rapidly. And on this day, the war between the two races finally erupted. The demons directly declared war on the humans, and the humans had no choice but to accept the battle. Otherwise, the demon army would directly surge into the human territory and kill until blood flowed like rivers in the human territory. The people would have no way to live, and if they accepted the battlefield wouldn't be in the human territory or the demon territory, but Chapter 1075. The Eastern Wilderness was neither in the human nor the goblin race's territory. It was the third large continent in the godly realm. Other than them, the humans and the goblin race were the two largest continents in the godly realm. The Eastern Wilderness was extremely far away from the humans and the goblin race. However, there were many teleportation portals and even wormholes that connected them. According to the legends, the Eastern Wilderness was lacking in the chi of heaven and earth. It was even thinner than the Providence continent. Therefore, there were no true gods living in the Eastern Wilderness. Moreover, there were no secret sites or relics here. For a long time, the Eastern Wasteland had been desolate, and very few people came here. This was the battlefield between the humans and the goblin race. It was only after one side was defeated that the victorious side would march straight into the other side's territory and completely annihilate them. Therefore, after the goblin race issued a challenge to the humans, the goblin race's army was teleported over and stationed at one end of the Eastern Wilderness. The Celestial Palace was the absolute ruler of the goblin race. When the war was launched, the Celestial Palace had already commanded the entire goblin race. Countless forces within the goblin race's territory were under the command of the Celestial Palace. Countless experts became the subordinates of the Celestial Palace and were teleported to the Eastern Wilderness. When the goblin race arrived at the Eastern Wilderness, the human warriors were teleported over as well. The four continents of the human race were ruled by the four great academies. This time, the four great academies were still the highest commanders. However, there would always be only one person in command. For some unknown reason, the infinite wilderness, the great wilderness, and the savage academy all handed over the command to the eldritch continent. And they became the highest level existences under the commanders, commanding the experts of the continents under their command. An all-out war broke out. Countless experts were teleported to the Eastern Wasteland. However, the Eastern Wasteland was simply too big. Even though countless experts were teleported over, they only occupied the tip of the iceberg. Humans, Saint City. Under the orders of the highest commander of the human race, Shenzhen immediately sent experts to the Eastern Wilderness to participate in the war. No one is allowed to disobey. An expert from the front lines entered Shenzhen, left behind an order, and then left. Other than Shenzhen, all the forces in the God Realm had received this order. After receiving the order, most of the forces immediately brought their disciples to the front lines and joined the Eastern Wilderness. However, some forces did not make any moves, such as Shenzhen, Holy Mountain, inside the Holy Palace. The upper echelons of Shenzhen, including Wen Ling and the others, were all gathered together. However, in the Holy Temple, the seat that symbolized the highest position was empty. That was the seat of Sect Master Shenzhen, Murongyu. However, Murongyu did not appear here. He was in seclusion, trying to break through to the next realm. Everyone, now that the war between the two races has broken out, our Shenzhen has also received orders. What do you think? Murongyu was not here, So the one in charge of the overall situation was, of course, Zhao Jiqing. The war between the two races concerns the future of a human race. It is our duty to participate in the war. Immediately, someone said. Zhao Jiqing looked over and saw that the person who spoke was Murong Xian. We have to participate in the war and contribute our strength. However, our Shangzhen's overall strength is not strong. Although there are 10 quasi-saints in the war, 10 quasi-saint strength is not outstanding. The most important thing is still the strength of an ordinary disciple. Although some of our disciples in Shangzhen have reached the immemorial God realm, and there are also quite a number of heavenly Emperor realm disciples. However, in the face of an army of trillions of demons, our strength is just a drop of water in the ocean. We can't do anything. Moreover, if we are not careful, we will all be killed. Moreover, if we go to the eastern wilderness now, we will definitely be cannon fodder. Therefore, we have to participate in the war. However, now is not the time. We have to wait for the Holy Lord to come out of seclusion before making a decision. Yang Qin stepped forward and said in a low voice, a quasi-saint, even a 10th level quasi-saint, would not be able to withstand a single blow in the face of trillions of powerhouses. Moreover, at the beginning of the war, the quasi-saint would definitely not be allowed to participate in the war directly. Without the quasi-saint's protection, many of the Shangzhen's disciples would only be cannon fodder. We have to participate in the war, and we have to participate now. A voice sounded, and then a figure flashed in front of everyone's eyes. The seat that symbolized the highest authority and status in Shangzhen was already occupied by a person. It was Murong Yu. But Yang Qin wanted to say something, but before she could finish, she was interrupted by Murong Yu. Although our Shangzhen strength is not enough, if we participate in the war now, we don't have to go to the front lines. Fighting is the best way to raise one's cultivation. Moreover, there are many benefits to participating in the war now. Everyone looked at Murong Yu in confusion. Right now, Primeval College is the leader of the human race, and the other 3 colleges have the highest authority other than Primeval College. Therefore, they have the most resources. However, don't forget that our Shangzhen has 10 quasi-saint. With this lineup, we can obtain a decent position in the human race's army. Under such circumstances, having more people did not necessarily mean that one's position would be high. One's position was determined by the number of powerhouses they had. Perhaps Abyssal College had more quasi-saint than Shangzhen, but Shangzhen's true combat strength was not weak. After quasi-saint, 1/3 of Shangzhen's disciples will go to the eastern wilderness. 10,000 years later, it will be the other 1/3's turn. Murong Yu glanced at everyone and said in a low voice, the large-scale war this time was definitely not something that could end in tens of thousands of years. It was even possible for it to last for a few eras. Wenling, the 10 of you, follow me. Murong Yu glanced at the 10 of them, then put them into the Hichu Luoshu world. This is the heavenly region? When Wenling and the other 2 stepped on solid ground again, they were shocked to discover that they had re-entered the heavenly region. That's right. With my breakthrough this time, I can already control more quasi-saint. Only then did everyone look over, only to see that Murong Yu had already broken through to the peak of the heavenly emperor realm. All 3 divine deities had reached the peak of the heavenly emperor realm. All these years, when Su Hao's time accelerated to increase the strength of Shangzhen's disciples, his own strength also increased. The space divine deity and lightning divinity were both raised by Murong Yu using the power of chaos. Holy Master, are we going to attack directly in Heavenly Region City? Yang Qin asked. At this moment, it was night in Heavenly Region City. All the quasi-saint were in the city. Control 2 level 10 quasi-saint first. Murong Yu nodded, then re-entered the Hichu Luoshu world with everyone. Under the guidance of Wenling and the others, Hichu Luoshu floated into the courtyard of a level 10 quasi-saint before long. This quasi-saint's name was Shinahai. He was one of Wenling's friends. After Wenling was controlled by Murong Yu, Everything he did now was with Murong Yu as the center. Therefore, when he found out about Murong Yu's thoughts, he decided to come over and subdue Shinahai. Attack! When Hichu Luoshu approached Shinahai, Murong Yu immediately released Wen Ling and the others. The 10 of them were already prepared in the Hichu Luoshu world. The moment they appeared, they exploded with their strongest attacks towards Shinahai. Of course, they were all controlling skills. After all, they were not here to kill. Shinahai, who was originally cultivating with his eyes closed, reacted the moment when Ling and the others appeared. However, the attacks of Wen Ling and the others had already drowned him. Wen Ling, what are you doing? Shinahai felt that he had been imprisoned, and his strength had been sealed. He could not help but shout in anger. Sending you out of heavenly region. Wen Ling shouted and rushed to Shinahai's side. He slapped Shinahai's head. Immediately, Shinahai's vision turned black, and he fainted. Shua! In less than 5 breaths of time, a level 10 quasi-saint was subdued. It was not that Shinahai was too weak, but that the experts on Wen Ling's side were too strong. Although a level 10 quasi-saint was much stronger than a level 9 quasi-saint. However, Wen Ling and Yang Qin were both level 10 quasi-saint, together with the other 8 quasi-saint, and a sneak attack at that. Unless Shinahai was a saint, he would not be able to escape. Holy Lord! In Hichu Luoshu, when Shinahai woke up, he first looked at everyone, then respectfully bowed to Murong Yu. Murong Yu nodded and looked at Wen Ling. Thus, Wen Ling directly sent a ray of divine light into Shinahai's memory. Immediately, Shinahai knew everything in detail. What a guy. You can actually leave heavenly region, but you didn't come to find me. You're too mean. After knowing everything, Shinahai glared at Wen Ling. All right, the next target is Yang Qin's friend, Zhua Qiuqing. As he spoke, Wen Ling and the others had already been released by Murong Yu. Zhua Qiuqing, a level 10 quasi-saint, was even stronger than Yang Qin. In fact, she had already been alerted before Yang Qin and the others appeared. However, it was useless. Wen Ling, Yang Qin, and Shinahai were all level 10 quasi-saint, and there were still 8 other quasi-saint. 11 people acted at the same time and restrained Zhua Qiuqing before she could retaliate. Another level 10 quasi-saint. At this point, Murong Yu had already controlled 4 level 10 quasi-saint. However, with Murong Yu's current strength, controlling 4 level 10 quasi-saint was already his limit. However, controlling quasi-saint of other realms was not a problem. Thus, Murong Yu controlled 4 level 9 quasi-saint and 4 level 8 quasi-saint. 20 quasi-saint, 4 of which were level 10 quasi-saint, and the weakest was level 7 quasi-saint. Shenzhen's strength rose sharply again. Chapter 1076. The eastern wilderness was divided into 2 large regions. The north was occupied by the humans, while the south was occupied by the demons. The empty space between the 2 races was the battlefield. However, it was still empty at the moment. The 2 races were still in the process of gathering their forces. Once they finished gathering their forces, the most tragic battle would begin. The human encampment had long since been cultivated into large cities. The 4 largest cities were Eldritch, Tianhuang, Manhuang, and Dahuang. Among them, Eldritch City was the city with the highest authority. Almost all of the upper echelons of the human army were gathered here. In the spacious hall, the human commander, the dean of Primeval College, and a quasi-ranker. Yu and Yuan sat on the chair that symbolized the highest status and position. On both sides of the hall sat some of the top powers of the human race. These people formed the upper echelons of the human army. At the moment, they were gathered together to discuss the war and the distribution of resources. Abyssal College and the other 2 colleges, as well as the Fan family and other superpowers, were all present. At this moment, a group of 5 people shot over from afar, landing at the entrance of the hall and walking straight in. Who dares to be so impudent? Is this a place where just anyone can come in? A bad-tempered rancor in the hall shouted angrily. At the same time, his sage-to-be aura burst out and rushed towards the few people who were striding in from the door. How impressive! Who do you think you are? How dare you order us around again? When Ling stepped forward and Quasi-Saint level 10 aura burst out. It tore through the void like a storm and rushed towards the Quasi-Saint. Bang! In an instant, the chair that the Quasi-Saint was sitting on was shattered. His entire body was sent flying backwards by the impact. In the process, he violently coughed up blood. How dare you? How dare you? Seeing this, some of the people in the hall were enraged. This was because only the most powerful people in the human army were qualified to enter. Since this person had only just arrived, it was obvious that he was not qualified. Moreover, the intruder injured the Quasi-Saint in the main hall as soon as he appeared. How could they not be furious? What the hell is this? Could it be that you want to bully me with numbers? Shin Tu-Hai sneered and took a step forward to stand with when Ling 10th Order Quasi-Saint's aura also erupted, sweeping forward. At the same time, Yang Qin and Zhuoqiu Qing behind Murong Yu erupted with the might of a 10th rank Quasi-Saint. In an instant, the auras of 4 10th rank Quasi-Saints enveloped the entire hall. Incomparably terrifying. Everyone, you don't seem to welcome me? Or is it that I, Murong Yu, am not qualified to enter this hall? Murong Yu glanced at everyone and said with a smile, 4 10th Order Quasi-Saint. Everyone present was shocked. Didn't Murong Yu only have 2 10th Order Quasi-Saint? How come there were 2 more 10th Order Quasi-Saint? Just how many 10th Order Quasi-Saint did he have behind him? All right, Murong Yu, sit down. At this moment, the Dean of Primeval College, who is also the Supreme Commander of the human army, Yuan Yuan, shouted in a low voice. At the same time, he waved his hand, and a chair appeared on the left side of the hall, near Savage College. Seeing this seat, everyone present was shocked, because this seat was second only to Infinite Wasteland College, Great Wilderness College, and Savage College. However, everyone soon felt relieved. With the strength that Murong Yu had displayed, he was qualified to sit there. Moreover, in terms of the strength of the top experts, even the Savage Academy and the others would be suppressed. However, the 3 colleges ruled 3 large continents. Even if the top experts were not as strong as Shenzhen, their positions would not change. While everyone was shocked, the 3 great academies were somewhat displeased. Strictly speaking, Murong Yu was still a student of Primeval College. Now, Primeval College was the supreme commander of the human army, and Murong Yu was also in such a high position, especially Abyssal College. After Murong Yu appeared, they all looked at him with murderous intent, as if they wanted to kill Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu acted as if he didn't see it and sat down. However, when Ling and the other 3 merely stood respectfully behind him, not uttering a single word. Suddenly, the sacred hall fell silent. No one spoke. Murong Yu frowned slightly. Just as he was about to speak, Yuan Yuan said, "Let's continue the discussion. Murong Yu, what do you think?" Murong Yu was unhappy. What did he think? He did not even know what they were discussing. What did he think? Everyone here is the upper echelon of the human army. We should rule our own forces and fight against the demons until we destroy them, said a big shot from Abyssal College. Murong Yu sneered. Did he not mean to make Shenzhen cannon fodder? The 3 colleges had countless forces and warriors under them. However, Murong Yu only had 1 Shenzhen. They could not compare in terms of numbers. He said, "Our Shenzhen has already brought 1/3 of our disciples to the front lines. We must participate in the war. However, my current position is the 4th. Therefore, I do not wish for Shenzhen's resources to be unfairly distributed." That's impossible. With so few people from Shenzhen participating in the war, you can only get the same amount of resources, said the big shot from Abyssal College. Murong Yu sneered. Our Shenzhen takes 10,000 years as a benchmark. Every 10,000 years, 1/3 of our disciples will come to Eastern Wilderness. In other words, our Shenzhen is participating in the war. Shouldn't we get the same amount of resources as our status? Or should I say that the resources you get from Abyssal College can allow all the gods from all the continents, including Abyssal College, to participate in the war. The big shot from Abyssal College fell silent. In fact, the resources were distributed according to their seats in the hall. However, Shenzhen had too few disciples. If they could get so many resources, it would be unfair to them. How many disciples does Shenzhen have? Millions? Tens of millions? Hundreds of millions? Said a big shot from Savage College. If I didn't remember wrongly, Shenzhen's disciples aren't very strong, right? If they aren't strong, it means that they won't be of much use in the war. It's just a waste of resources. Murong smiled and looked at the big shot from Savage College. He then pointed at Wenling and the other three and said, "You're saying that the 4 level 10 quasi-saint aren't strong? Does your Savage College have saint-level existences?" The big shot from Savage College fell silent. Murong, the only ones you have are the 4 level 10 quasi-saint, right? How many quasi-saint are there in Shenzhen? Dozens? This is a war between two races. Dozens of quasi-saints might not be able to do much. The one who spoke was a big shot from Great Desolation College. Murong looked at him with disdain and sneered. Great Desolation College has ruled the Great Desolation mainland for countless years. May I ask, how many level 10 quasi-saints do you have? As he spoke, Murong indifferently swept his gaze over everyone present. He then said in a deep voice, "I'm not afraid to tell you that even a saint-level expert can't do anything to me. They're just fake saints." Everyone was shocked. They didn't know why Murong was so arrogant. Could it be that he really had a saint backing him? Today, I'm only here to get the resources I deserve. As for everything else, I'm not interested. Of course, in this war, you'll know if our Shenzhen has any great achievements. Before he finished speaking, he left the hall with Wenling and the rest. Impudent. Too arrogant. After Murong left, the big shots from the 3 colleges were enraged. However, other than them, the big shots from the other forces only frowned. Although they were unhappy, they didn't say it out loud. After leaving Great Desolation City, Murong went to the back of the army and released 1/3 of Shenzhen's disciples. After so many years of development, the number of Shenzhen's disciples in the realm of the gods had increased to hundreds of millions. After all, it was still extremely difficult to become an immortal or god. Most importantly, it hadn't been long since Murong had ascended. Although Shenzhen had various resources to support it, there weren't many people as powerful as Murong. Therefore, if Shenzhen wanted more disciples to ascend, they would have to wait for many years. Build the holy city. After Shenzhen's disciples appeared, they immediately started to build the holy city. This war would definitely be a long and drawn-out war. After 100 years, the armies from both sides had gathered. On this day, the experts from the demon race attacked. They brought hundreds of millions of experts from the demon race and flew over to start a war. Experts at the level of quasi-saint couldn't attack and couldn't kill the leader. This was an agreement that both sides had reached. This was because in this war, it was either you die or I die. Therefore, no matter if it was the human race or the demon race, they had to first exhaust the ordinary people of the other side. Moreover, if quasi-saint attacked, it would only be a chaotic battle. By then, even if they won, they would suffer great losses. After all, although experts at the level of quasi-saint were powerful, they would be killed quickly in the face of hundreds of millions of ordinary gods. This confrontation was just a test. The human race immediately sent out hundreds of millions of troops to confront the demon race on the battlefield. Among them, Murong was among them. This time, Murong took the initiative to fight. Moreover, he only brought 100 million disciples from Shenzhen to fight. Ha! Is there no one else in the human race? They actually sent out these good-for-nothings to fight? Seeing that the Murong standing in front of the army was just a heavenly emperor realm, and the realms of the soldiers behind him were also mixed, the many experts from the demon race could not help laughing loudly, their expressions full of disdain. Chapter 1077. Murong did not lack comprehension pills. and they could accelerate time. But even so, there were not many heavenly venerables in Shenzhen. Therefore, among the Shenzhen disciples led by Murong Yu, the highest realm was at the heavenly venerables, and the lowest realm was even at the heavenly venerables. The lower the realm, the more people there were. On the contrary, the demon army on the other side also had people of all realms. But there were many heavenly venerables, primordial gods, and heavenly emperors. The reason why the demons laughed in disdain was because Murong Yu's strength was at the peak of the heavenly emperor realm, and the leader of the demon army was at the peak of the heavenly venerables. In the god realm, there are not many quasi-saint, but there were definitely many heavenly venerables. It was not only the demons who mocked Murong Yu's lineup. Most of the humans did not think highly of it. What the hell is this kid doing? Although there are many experts in Shenzhen and quasi-saint, the ordinary disciples are too trashy. Under the situation where quasi-saint can't take action, wouldn't they be courting death if they went out? Lose face. If they are defeated, it will be a huge blow to the morale of our human army. A big shot from Abyssal College said with a gloomy face. They want to be in the limelight so much that they've gone crazy. They're simply courting death. Why don't we send troops to hold the line? Otherwise, if they fail, it will be a serious blow to our army's morale. Fangua glanced indifferently at the person who spoke and said, Murong Yu never does things that he's not confident of. Don't worry blindly. Fangua, I know that you two have a very good relationship in private, but do you think Murong Yu has any hope of winning like this? Fangua immediately fell silent, because the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. Even he was not optimistic. General, let's send troops. Many people looked at the human general, Yuan Yuan, and asked for instructions. Believe in Murong Yu, Yuan Yuan said calmly. If he did not have confidence in Murong Yu, he would not have allowed Murong Yu to bring Shenzhen's disciples to battle. Human, come out and accept your death. Inside the demon race camp, a peak heavenly emperor powerhouse stepped out of the air, looking at Murong Yu's side with a look of disdain as he shouted loudly. Shenzhen immediately asked many people to fight, but they were all suppressed by Murong Yu. He wanted to fight this battle himself. Thus, he rose into the air and slowly walked towards the demon race elite. Both humans and demons couldn't help but shake their heads. Which general would go out to meet the enemy at the very beginning? Murong Yu was truly. Many humans felt helpless. On the other hand, the demon race was overjoyed, especially the one who was going to fight. He felt that if he could kill Murong Yu, it would definitely deal a huge blow to the morale of the human army, and the Celestial Palace would definitely reward him with large amounts of resources. At that time, his status would rise rapidly. Sigh. Many people in the demon race territory could not help shaking their heads and sighing, secretly regretting that they did not fight first. Otherwise, the credit would have been theirs. Who are you? State your name, so that I can record it in the merit book. The demon pointed at Murong Yu and said loudly, Holy Lord Shenzhen, Murong Yu. Murong Yu said coolly, then took a step out and disappeared on the spot. Boom! The next moment, before his figure appeared, an incomparably huge fist already appeared out of thin air. An aura that could destroy heaven and earth erupted fiercely. This divine hammer-like fist slammed onto the demon race powerhouse's body. After a huge explosion, this demon race heavenly emperor's entire body was blown into billions of pieces. Even his soul did not have time to escape. At this time, Murong Yu's figure slowly appeared from the void. The demon race heavenly emperor was dead. The speed was so fast that everyone who saw this scene could not react in time. The demon race is merely SOSO. Murong Yu stood in the void and looked at the demon race army in the distance indifferently, his eyes full of disdain. What fast speed! What powerful strength! Only until this time did everyone on both sides react, each and every one of them extremely shocked in their hearts. Both peak heavenly emperors, but Murong Yu killed the other party with one punch. How terrifying was his strength! Holy Lord is mighty. Holy Lord is invincible. Right then, Shenzhen's disciples who reacted started shouting. For a moment, the morale of the humans skyrocketed rapidly, while the demon race's morale was somewhat dispirited. Don't be arrogant. In the demon race army, a primordial god realm powerhouse tore through the air. Before the person even approached, a large hand blotted out the sky and covered the earth, suppressing down on Muronyu. Primordial god. Right now, it was a fair war. The demon race side actually wanted a high-level powerhouse to take action to deal with Muronyu. After the humans reacted, there were already people who could not resist cursing. Primordial god is merely SOS. Before the other party reported his name, Muronyu disappeared on the spot in an instant. The power of 3 divine personas erupted at the same time. In an instant, Muronyu's strength was raised to peak primordial god. Of course, what he increased now was only his strength, but his realm still remained at peak primordial god. I can kill you with one punch. Muronyu roared, 1,000-army elephant pulling fist, fiercely smashing out. Boom! After an earth-shaking explosion, the primordial god's large hand was directly shattered by Muronyu's punch. Meanwhile, Muronyu's divine fist only paused for a moment, then continued to bombard the primordial god without any hindrance. The divine fist was invincible, and the obstruction of a void seemed to exist at all. With one punch, he appeared in front of the primordial god. The primordial god was horrified and immediately swallowed the words he had yet to speak. With a thought, his figure retreated explosively. Dying! With a roar, Muronyu's divine fist suddenly accelerated and directly bombarded the other party's body. Impossible! The demon clan expert roared as he looked at his body that had been smashed into millions of pieces. However, his consciousness had already dissipated. The primordial god of the demon race was dead. He was also killed by Muronyu with one punch. How is this possible? He's only a celestial emperor. How can he kill a primordial god with one punch? Could it be that the primordial god race is really too weak? Seeing this scene, countless people in the primordial god race army were puzzled in their hearts. And once this kind of negative mentality appeared, their morale would start to plummet. But morale was the most important thing to an army. While on the other side, the morale of the humans, especially Shenzhen's disciples, rose to a peak. Each and every one of them was undoubtedly excited, as if they were possessed by a fiend god, able to jump realms and kill people. Is there an Empyrean realm powerhouse who wants to fight with me? Muronyu stood in the air, looking at the primordial god race army in the distance. I'll go and kill him. Countless primordial god race powerhouses could not hold back the anger in their hearts and requested to go to battle one after another. I'll go and kill him, the primordial god race General Ganshan said in a solemn voice. At the same time, he strode out in large strides and welcomed Muronyu. Ganshan, peak Empyrean realm, his strength formidable. As the primordial god race army's general this time, his strength far surpassed ordinary Empyrean powerhouses. Ganshan stood in front of Muronyu and said to Muronyu in a solemn voice, Muronyu, kneel down and submit. Lead your Shenzhen to join our primordial god race. I can guarantee you a lifetime of glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. Muronyu smiled and said, Why don't you surrender and become my slave? I guarantee that you'll ascend to the holy world in the future. Ganshan had a look of disdain, his expression full of sneering. How many people wanted to become saints, but could not become saints? Although Muronyu's strength was powerful, he was not even a quasi-saint. How could he be so arrogant? Since you don't believe, then forget it. Muronyu said coolly as if he was having a heart-to-heart talk with a friend. However, if I were you, I'd immediately lead the troops and retreat. Otherwise, this several 100 million army of yours in a while, I can wipe them all out, leaving no fowls or dogs. Ha ha! Ganshan laughed out loud and said, I'd like to see how you're going to wipe out my hundreds of millions army now. At the same time, the primordial god race and the primordial god race army also laughed out loud, thinking that Muronyu was too arrogant. just based on their 100 million people. As long as Quasi-Saint did not take action, unless the human race sent a few billion troops, it would be impossible to wipe out their hundreds of millions army. Since that's the case, then do it. Ah, ah, ah. Just as Murong shouted the word "do it" in a primordial god race army. Those primordial god race members who had reached the heavenly venerate realm all screamed in agony. Most of the people who screamed were directly killed. As for some of the more powerful individuals, they managed to react in time and quickly retreated. However, one figure after another stepped out of the void and chased after them like a shadow. In the end, these people could not escape at all and were directly killed. In a short moment, at least 100,000 primordial god race members were killed. The most terrifying thing was that after killing these 100,000 primordial god race members, those people who took action disappeared into thin air again. The primordial god race army was immediately shocked, each and every one of them looking around vigilantly. They wanted to attack in a large area, but they did not dare to, because they were surrounded by their own people. The moment they took action, they would definitely hurt their own people and might not be able to hurt those people hidden in the void. While the primordial god race army was bewildered, those people who disappeared appeared again. This time, their targets were still heavenly venerate powerhouses. A series of screams sounded again. 100,000 heavenly venerate powerhouses fell again. The primordial god race army finally panicked. Although they had a lot of heavenly venerates, if this continued, they would all be wiped out sooner or later. And just how many people were there on the other side? But it was unknown. Run. Finally, some of the primordial god race members who were terrified could not help but flee. As long as one person escaped, then there would be a chain reaction, with even more people fleeing. Finally, the primordial god race army was in chaos. The hundreds of millions of people scattered into a group and retreated explosively. No matter how the generals tried to control it, they could not control it. It's your turn now. Murong looked at Ganshan and smiled slightly. However, as he spoke, he retreated explosively. And right at this moment, several incomparably terrifying forces shot out from the void and strangled Ganshan. In an instant, an incomparably strong aura of death enveloped Ganshan's heart. Chapter 1078. Boom! Just as Ganshan's heart was enveloped by a strong aura of death, those few forces had already broken through the obstruction of the void and bombarded his body. A terrifying power erupted in an instant. Instantly, Ganshan only had time to let out a furious roar before his entire body exploded. Even his soul could not escape. The demon General Ganshan was killed. Seeing this scene, the hundreds of millions of demon race soldiers were even more frightened. All of them were terrified and quickly fled for their lives. Like monkeys scattering when a tree falls, the demon race army no longer had anyone who wanted to fight, and their morale fell to the bottom. During this process, many of the fleeing demon race soldiers began to die. They were killed by their own people, killed without a doubt, and so on. At this time, those black-robed men who had appeared out of thin air were no longer hiding in the void. Instead, they directly launched their strongest attacks, each of which was a fatal blow. They attacked wildly. Kill! Murong roared. Immediately, Shenzhen's 100 million disciples, who had long been prepared, shouted at the same time and rushed out. Unlike the defeated demon race, Shenzhen's disciples were orderly. 10 people formed a small team and rushed into the demon race army at the same time. Immediately, the demon race army, which had no power to fight back, began to die even faster. The demon race army's numbers decreased rapidly. On Shenzhen's side, 10 people formed a small team. 10 small teams formed a large team. 10 large teams formed a legion. Each team looked after each other. Because of this, they received very little damage. There were almost no casualties. Defeat. Defeat. Because of those black-robed men who had suddenly launched a sneak attack, almost all of the demon race's heavenly venerables were killed. The remaining people had long been scared out of their wits and were crazily killed by Shenzhen's disciples. Therefore, In less than half a day, the demon race army, which was 7 to 8 times more than Shenzhen's disciples, was completely defeated by Shenzhen's disciples. They were all killed. Not a single one was left alive. Is this Shenzhen's strength? Why were those men in black so terrifyingly strong? They're all hiding in the demon race's army? Seeing this scene, everyone on the human side was shocked. In this battle, every one of Shenzhen's disciples displayed strength that exceeded their cultivation level, especially those men in black. Their invisibility ability was too terrifying. If they hadn't appeared and hid in the void, even the average quasi-saint wouldn't have been able to discover them. All of them were at the Empyrean realm. All of them had super powerful concealment techniques. Could they all be assassins? However, how could Shenzhen have so many assassins? Could it be someone from the Ghost organization? Everyone was puzzled, wondering about the origins of those black-clothed men. At this moment, the black-robed men had already hidden themselves in the void and disappeared. No matter how they scanned the area with their divine senses, they were unable to discover anything. These people were not the killers of the Phantom. They were the powerhouses of Shenzhen's 100,000 battle team. During this period of time, Murongyu used Hichu Luoshu's ability to accelerate time to raise their strength to the Empyrean realm, and even train them to be like immortals. This was the first time they appeared in public, but they didn't disappoint Murongyu. Shenzhen's disciples didn't disappoint Murongyu either. After cleaning up the battlefield, Murongyu brought Shenzhen's disciples back. The first battle was a victory. It greatly inspired the hearts of the human race. At the same time, Murongyu's goal was also achieved. In one fell swoop, they displayed strength that wasn't inferior to any superforce. Moreover, this wasn't even taking into account quasi-saint strength. For a time, Shenzhen's name quickly spread throughout the human race, reaching the peak of history. In the human race's territory, even more people rushed to the holy city, wanting to join Shenzhen and become Shenzhen's disciples. As soon as Murongyu returned to the holy city, the emissary of the human race army arrived. After wantonly praising Murongyu and Shenzhen, he even gave Murongyu the resources rewarded by the commander. This was the reward for winning the battle. Murongyu accepted it without hesitation. Only a few of the 100,000 battle team's powerhouses were injured, and no one died. However, although Shenzhen's disciples had formed teams, there were still people who died. They lost 1,000th of their people, although they were all people of lower realms. When the post-battle statistics were presented, Murongyu couldn't help but frown slightly. 1,000 didn't seem like much, but how much was 1,000th of 100 million? 100,000 people. In other words, after 1,000 battles like this, Shenzhen's people might be wiped out. Shenzhen's strength still needs to be strengthened. Murongyu frowned slightly, but ordered to start training in the holy city. In a large-scale war, although individual strength had some effect, it relied more on the role of the team. Murongyu, Shenzhen, how could their strength increase so quickly? When the news of the annihilation of the entire army came back, the demon race was furious. It's mainly those black-robed men. Their sneak attack greatly damaged the morale of our army. In the end, we were all wiped out. Did you find out the identity of those people? Could they be the ghost killers? They don't look like the ghost killers, and they have never been exposed. It should be Shenzhen's secret strength. Could it be the secret army trained by the saint behind Murongyu? It's just 100,000 people. After being exposed this time, they will be useless in the future. The demon race felt that as long as they were more careful in the future, Shenzhen's people would not be caught off guard like today. Perhaps they wanted to boost their morale. After the first defeat, the demon race launched another attack. This time, the demon race army was even larger, reaching billions. When the human race thought that Murongyu would continue to fight, Shenzhen's side did not make any movements. In the end, Abyssal College could only go out and fight. It was different from the first battle where they won cleanly. In this great battle, the human clan and the demon clan's armies were evenly matched. In a vast and boundless battlefield, they were in a frenzy, fighting and killing each other. The sound of killing shook the sky. Blood splattered, blood flowed like a river, bones were everywhere, and the whole earth seemed to be dyed red. Both sides added up to tens of billions of experts. Tens of billions of people attacking at the same time. The scene was extremely spectacular and tragic. The terrifying power continued to erupt, shattering the sky and shattering the turbulent space. This is a real war, floating in the sky and looking at the tens of billions of people fighting in front. Even Murong Yu was stunned by the tragic atmosphere. This war lasted for a few months. It was only when both sides suffered heavy losses, adding up to less than 1 billion people, that both sides retreated. However, in the following period of time, wars of this scale, or even larger scale, were constantly being played out. After all, in this war it was either you die or I die. Tens of billions, hundreds of billions of casualties. However, compared to the human clan and the demon clan, which were as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River, these dead soldiers were only a small portion. In addition to those who died, there were even more people who were injured. In the realm of the gods, injuries that could be healed quickly were not called injuries. The so-called injuries were injuries that required large amounts of resources and time to heal. On this day, Murong Yu's St. Han Hall officially opened. Facing the entire human race, whether it was a small injury or a big injury, whether it was a new illness or an old illness, as long as one could afford the price, he could treat them. However, what made Murong Yu depressed was that after a few days of the St. Han Hall's opening, there were almost no outsiders who came to seek treatment from him other than Shenzhen's disciples. That was true. He was only a heavenly emperor. In the great desolate city, Old Man Pei, a genius doctor whose name had shaken the entire divine realm, had been overseeing the city for a long time. Furthermore, his consultation fee was extremely high. This was because Old Man Pei and the other genius doctors were working for the human army. The army had subsidies for them. The consultation fee was not high, and they were famous genius doctors. Those who were injured naturally knew what to choose. Old Man Pei, are you really unable to heal my injuries in a short period of time? In the primeval desolation city, in the rejuvenation hall, a quasi-saint level expert roared at Old Man Pei. The war had been going on for so many days, and it was not just ordinary gods who were fighting every day. There were also battles between quasi-saint level experts. However, this was only a battle between quasi-saint level experts. They were not allowed to participate in the battles between ordinary gods. The quasi-saint who was roaring at this moment was a level 5 quasi-saint. Not long ago, he met a level 5 quasi-saint from the demon race on the battlefield. They were originally mortal enemies, and when enemies met, their eyes blazed with hatred. Without saying a word, they started the battle. After a few months of battle, the human quasi-saint successfully killed the demon race quasi-saint. However, he was also heavily injured by the demon race quasi-saint's final counterattack. With his own strength, he would need at least 1,000,000 years to recover from his injuries and reach his peak strength. With the current situation, if he did not have strength for a few million years, he would probably be killed directly by others. He would not even have the ability to protect himself. I'm a divine doctor, but I can't treat all injuries. Old Man Pei said helplessly. He would need all sorts of godly ingredients and herbs to treat his injuries. Furthermore, with such heavy injuries, even if he had medicine, he would not be able to recover in a short period of time. Is there really no way? The level 5 quasi-saint looked at divine Dr. Pei with a face full of displeasure. He felt that divine Dr. Pei's reputation was undeserved. You can look for Murong Yu. He might have a way. However, you will need to prepare sufficient consultation fees. Old Man Pei said indifferently. Murong Yu? Chaos Shenzhen. That Murong Yu? He can do it. The level 5 quasi-saint looked at Old Man Pei suspiciously. If you want to recover, look for Murong Yu. However, if you don't have sufficient consultation fees, he won't even bother to look at you. Old Man Pei said indifferently. Shua. Before Old Man Pei could finish his sentence, The level 5 quasi-saint disappeared from his original position. Old man Pei shook his head. This guy actually dared to use his strength. Isn't he afraid of aggravating his injuries? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.